So we are now broadcasting. So whenever the chairman's ready, we can start broadcasting into Channel 13.
Let's begin. I'm calling to order this hearing or roundtable of the Committee of the Whole of the Council of the District of Columbia. I'm Phil Mendelson, Chairman of the Council and Chair of the Committee of the Whole. Today is Friday, May 26th, 2021. The time is 9:14 in the morning, and we're conducting this hearing virtually. It is being broadcast live on the council website, www.dccouncil.us, on cable channel 13, the Office of Cable Television's website. And I believe it is also available live on the chairman's website, which is www.chairmanmendelson.com/live. Again, chairmanmendelson.com/live. This is the third of 3 hearings that the Committee of the Whole is having on education this week. The first hearing was on Monday, school reopening and academic recovery, hearing from experts. The second hearing was on Wednesday evening, school reopening and academic recovery, hearing from Wards 7 and 8 families. And this hearing today is on school reopening and academic recovery, hearing from government witnesses only. This, as I said, this roundtable, I'm reading from the hearing notice now, will be the third in a series of roundtables on the reopening of the district's public schools and the executive's plan for addressing student learning loss that has occurred during the COVID-19 pandemic. The first 2 roundtables were focused on hearing from families east of the river, where we believe that the impact of distance learning, the adverse impact, has been the greatest. We also heard from experts on issues such as IT, that would be infrastructure and so forth related to IT, family engagement, and vaccine hesitancy. The purpose of this roundtable today is to receive testimony from government witnesses in response to the testimony given during those 2 roundtables, and as a follow-up to prior roundtables held during this year on public school reopening and academic learning loss. The record in this matter is open until 5 p.m. on June 11th. That's for all 3 hearings. The record's open until 5 p.m. on June 11th. This is a complicated issue, a difficult issue, but a critical issue because public education is an important service that the government provides to the public and is arguably the best way that the district addresses equity issues and the elimination of poverty. Because of the long-term consequences of education, that is, a effective education enables youth of today to get jobs and better paying jobs and deal with issues related to having employment and good employment. And poor education has the opposite effect. Let me turn to colleagues for opening statements, and then we'll turn to the witnesses. And I will note the witnesses are Paul Kine, Deputy Mayor for Education, Louis Farabee, Chancellor of the DC Public Schools, Shauna Young, who is the Interim State Superintendent of the Office of State Superintendent of Education, and Dr. Barbara Bazron, who is the Director of the Department of Behavioral Health. And I understand that Dr. Bazron has to leave sometime around 11 this morning. So I'm going to recognize Councilmember Che, because I understand she not only was the first of council members to arrive, but arrived before the chairman, which is not hard to do. Councilmember Che.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing. And as you mentioned, it's actually the 4th hearing on education that we've had just this week. And it highlights the extreme importance of making plans and doing our best to recover from this unprecedented situation with our students and the potential to affect students, again, as you mentioned, throughout their lives. When students get behind and they can't catch up, sometimes that's a kind of a disability that afflicts them all throughout their adulthood. So we have to figure out how we can assess and address learning loss, assess and address the emotional toll and the social toll that it has taken on our students. And we know that these problems are most acute when we're dealing with at-risk students. And what is happening it couldn't be more regrettable that the academic trajectory of our students, between at-risk students and others, is only growing wider, appallingly wider than it already was. And so it's important to hear not only what our academic leaders are planning to do, how they're planning to do it. I was pleased that the mayor's budget included significant funding for personnel in our schools, but we need to know what the plans are. And the second thing we need, and we heard this over and over, Mr. Chairman, you know this from parents, is the lack of communication between school leaders and parents, and having them understand what exactly is going on so that they can, do the best that they can from the home perspective with the school system. We need better, more extensive communication and a partnership between our parents and school leaders. So I'm grateful that you're having this hearing and we can hear from the school leaders about exactly what their plans are. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Che. Councilmember Trayon White.
Good morning, Chairman.
Morning.
Hearing. I'm also eager to hear from the government witnesses. As you said, we've been here a number of times trying to get some answers and clarity so we can better communicate to the public what's going to happen with the school year. Education has been a priority for me even before being on the council. Making sure our youth and young adults have a proper education is a high priority. One of the things you talked about was access to equitable and employment that pays to allow families to stay and thrive in the district is critical. There were a lot of things that came up that is critical around public safety, around the flow of the day, just to ensure that as we send our students to school, that they're being properly taken care of. I've been holding my own Ward 8 meetings and town halls to allow constituents to ask questions and voice their concerns. For months of conversation, one thing is critical, and that is there are still more questions than answers. HVAC systems to ensure proper air circulation are still not fully operable in all schools. These are concerns about, that comes up during the COVID-19 pandemic for not just students, but also teachers. We've seen what happened when we did a preliminary opening of schools, where we saw some teachers catching the virus and had to shut down or go home, and it just wasn't a good flow. Contrary to what we thought was going to happen, hearing from the chancellor. Then, of course, the issue of learning loss. These things are critical to the success of the city. And so there's been a huge achievement gap that's been widening even before the pandemic amongst Black and brown kids in the city. I hope that these government witnesses today can give us some reassurance of a solid plan, how to bridge those gaps and ensure safety and communication with families. And that's what I hear all the time. I have a lot of questions, but I don't have a lot of answers. And so I hope we can be more proactive than reactive as we had planned to send our students back to school. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Trayon White. Councilmember Anita Bonds.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. Special thanks to you really for convening this third leg of the important hearing on education and what we can expect as we reopen our schools and we move past the pandemic. I wanted this morning to really zero in on a couple of areas of concern. And for me, it's always been, what is it that we use in the way of tools to tackle this unprecedented learning loss? I heard my colleague articulate, well, we've had learning loss prior to the pandemic, which I think many of us acknowledge, particularly for our at-risk population. So today, I am hoping to hear not just an overarching plan for how we see moving forward with the educational product for our schools, but also to have an understanding of the different divisions. And for me, the divisions are what happens during the summer months. What's the curriculum there? What do we hope to obtain through the summer months and the summer school? Then as we move into the classroom, what are the goals and objectives there? And how will we measure progress? And of course, how are we going to stay on top of what we believe is occurring in the virtual learning environments? All of this leads to where will we be in academic attainment once we have moved forward to some degree while the pandemic is still around us. And so today is a very important day. We've heard from so many public witnesses. We have received ideas on what we need to do from the experts as well as from the parents and then some of the educational professionals, including our own union, teachers union, and our school board members. So today I want to see, I'm looking forward to understanding where we are at the administration level with implementing educational attainment with a focus on our academics into and pass today into the fall. So thank you, Chairman. Thank you for giving me an opportunity.
Thank you, Councilmember Bonds. I'm going to turn now to the witnesses, and I'm going to ask each to provide their statements, and then I will turn this over to questions from council members. Our goal is to end this hearing by noon, and so we will begin with Paul Kine. I had indicated before who the witnesses are, maybe because I don't see them all in the room yet. Paul Kine, Deputy Mayor for Education, Louis Farabee, Chancellor, DC Public Schools, Shauna Young, Interim State Superintendent of ASI, and Dr. Barbara Bazron, who's Director of the Department of Behavioral Health. Deputy Mayor Kine, do you want to begin?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Good morning.
Good morning.
Chairman Mendelson, members of the Committee of the Whole, my name is Paul Kine and I am the Deputy Mayor for Education. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. As a city, we are clearly at an important inflection point in the pandemic. Our residents and neighbors are getting vaccinated, and our city is reopening after making tremendous sacrifices during this pandemic to keep our communities safe. It is a time, of course, to remember what we have lost. For so many, it has been the loss of loved ones. It has been the loss of employment and the means to provide for families. And for our students, it has been the loss of 16 months of in-person learning and the vital connections that define childhood. While we have experienced painful loss, we've also seen everyday heroes step up. Our healthcare and other essential workers who have kept our critical services going, childcare workers, and K-12 educators who have innovated new ways to inspire and nurture our students. Teachers at all levels and in all sectors have sustained us, and I know every family has come to appreciate their indelible role. Now, as we continue to meet this unprecedented moment head on, it is time to accelerate our recovery efforts. We must continue to work closely together as a city. We must act with urgency, and we must take bold action. For almost a year, my office has been working with residents and leaders across the city to develop a comprehensive recovery plan, one that serves to mitigate any lasting harm to our children and bridge the fault lines of inequality. I am proud that we have developed our recovery plan in consultation with families, students, teachers, school leaders, and community members through listening sessions, community meetings, and other forums. Listening is at the heart of partnership. Their voices have informed our plans to date and will continue to drive the decisions and any needed adjustments going forward. We must also keep following the path of experts and evidence. A recovery plan of this scale and complexity must use proven solutions tailored to the unique needs faced by our residents. We have spent hundreds of hours in conversation with local and national experts and reading the research. I am pleased to share some of the results of our deep listening, studious research, and careful collaborative planning. The centerpiece of our recovery efforts focuses on school reopening. Getting students back into the classroom for full-time in-person instruction is the most important step we can take to accelerate learning. With increased vaccine availability, decreased community spread, and the precautions we have in place, it is safe for us to fully reopen schools. DC Health and OSSI have developed strong health and safety guidance and are offering ongoing technical assistance to our schools so they can create thoughtful, campus-specific plans. We are working closely with community partners to promote vaccinations for youth aged 12 and up and their families, and to provide critical information to those who are hesitant. For example, we will soon launch vaccination drop-in sites at DCPS schools, and we will be working with charter schools to serve as vaccination clinics through the DC Health Vaccine Exchange. We will also continue to offer a robust asymptomatic testing program to our schools to quickly detect and respond to positive COVID cases. A commitment to ensuring the safety of our students, teachers, and families is foundational to all our academic acceleration work. With our commitment to full-time in-person learning, we must re-engage our students and renew our focus on daily attendance and safe travel to and from school. For the upcoming school year, we are expanding our student outreach hub, staffed by Cfsa experts, to support schools' efforts to re-engage students who have disengaged. Through DC for-hire vehicles, we will also provide dedicated microtransit shuttles from Ward 7 and 8 schools in our safe passage zones, and a comprehensive Man the Block program, putting caring adults on the routes to and from school, as well as after-school mediation. To accelerate learning, we must expand access to extended learning opportunities and flood the city with high-intensity tutoring, which is the most effective academic intervention. When schools employ these two strategies and staff them with high-quality educators, the results are dynamic. Our extended access includes, as we have shared before, introducing innovative approaches to summer learning, taking advantage of new Department of Parks and Recreation boost camps, and offering opportunities through the Summer Youth Employment Program that couples learning with internships. Our sustained investment in high-intensity tutoring provides students with targeted one-on-one or very small group coaching on the skills they need to access and master grade-level content and to get ahead. Our integrated citywide approach to tutoring over the next 4 years will provide annual grants to CBOs with proven track records of academic success, match tutors to high-demand non-school sites, and offer consultation and training to help schools implement, monitor, evaluate, and continuously improve their tutoring programs. Our high-impact tutoring program will provide the infrastructure, funding, and tutor supply so schools have everything they need to adopt a strong program, reaching students most in need of targeted academic support at each campus. We must also work to address the trauma so many of our young people have experienced. We will dramatically expand our mental health services with a focus on significantly expanding DBH's school-based mental health program to add mental health clinicians to an additional 83 schools this coming year, effectively placing an expert clinician in every school in the city. We will also launch a new pilot in the Healthy Futures Initiative that will allow for on-site treatment for young children and their families at 8 child development centers. Our approach to mental health also includes a focus on the power of play and enrichment as an avenue to manage anxiety, strengthen social emotional learning, build confidence, and find positive outlets for self-expression. This includes new investments in DPR programming and out-of-school time for this summer and the upcoming school year to ensure families have access to a rich array of social, recreational, and fun activities. Our high schoolers have faced particular obstacles as they ready themselves for post-secondary opportunities, which is why we need to take action to ensure they are on a strong path to college or career. This requires an immediate investment in learning acceleration programs like high-impact tutoring. It also requires an expansion of our dual enrollment model to motivate high schoolers with early college credit. and new mentorship grants to sustain them as they consider options and transition to post-secondary. Additionally, we are investing in a long-term strategy to reimagine high school as a critical bridge to connect DC students to in-demand jobs in the Washington region. DC will provide students with critical work-based learning experiences through school year internships in 12th grade, expand work-based learning experiences starting in middle school, and launch an advanced technical center, which will serve as a regional hub of CTE programming and innovation to ensure wide access regardless of the specific school you attend. Finally, we must attend to the critical needs of our educators and our families. Our educators have worked tirelessly throughout this pandemic and deserve new personal and professional development opportunities. We will implement educator wellness and make professional coaching even easier for them to access, including virtually. Our families have also been towers of strength during this time while dealing with so much. We are excited to keep strong programs like Parent University and Wellness Wednesday going, and add new elements to reach more families and deepen the counseling support we offer. The DME will launch a family coaching program to place strong family coaches in up to 30 schools in the coming year. These coaches will help strengthen trust between families and provide them with support to navigate the available resources in and out of our education systems. These are only some of the many initiatives we have planned for our recovery. We are also undertaking significant work in early childhood education to strengthen and stabilize that sector and drive an inclusive jobs recovery program to ensure all residents can find their way into promising family-sustaining jobs. We are setting the district up to not only continue to be the fastest improving urban school system in the country, but also to overcome the opportunity gap that have persisted. Our road to reopening and recovery in education will require a comprehensive and collaborative approach. We look forward to continuing to partner with families, students, teachers, schools, and council to ensure, as I said at the outset, we come out of this pandemic stronger and more resilient than before. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today. I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Kine. There will be questions, but let's go through other witnesses. Chancellor Farabee.
Good morning, Chairman Mendelson, members
Good morning.
Members of the Committee of the Whole and staff. I'm Dr. Louis D. Farabee, Chancellor of the District of Columbia Public Schools. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. Today's hearing is on an incredibly important topic. I want to share with you more about our progress this spring, plans for the summer, and what we're building towards next year with the full return of our students. I want to begin with appreciation of our students, our staff, our teachers, our school leaders, our families. They have exhibited tremendous resiliency during the COVID-19 public health emergency. While we've seen success in DCPS virtual learning, we also hear from parents and families that their students are ready for more time in school. We hear from teachers that their students need individualized support that is best provided in person. From our students excited to return to in-person learning, we hear that they miss their relationships with their teachers and peers. Our plan to return to full in-person learning this fall is rooted in a clear understanding that COVID-19 has disproportionately affected our students and families of color in our schools in Ward 7 and 8. Black students have experienced the most considerable drop in in-seat attendance this year, and academically, the early literacy gaps are widening between Black and white students. These inequities inform the decision to fully reopen in the fall and why we're placing learning recovery at the heart of everything we do. As a result, we are aggressively targeting federal stimulus dollars to fund initiatives that address academic and social-emotional learning impacts of COVID-19. Since November, we have started our phased approach to reopening school. DCPS has seen an increase in the number of students back in the classroom, jumping from 900 students returning to school in term 2 to 10,000 students scheduled for term 3. We now have more than 14,000 DCPS students scheduled for in-person programming at their school each week in term 4. This summer, we are building on this momentum and offering expanded enrichment and summer learning opportunities to serve up to 19,000 students. With that in mind, we're excited to fully open this fall. Our citywide plan is to have in-person learning 5 days a week for all students in the school year 21-22. Through collaboration, transparency, flexibility, we are working to ensure schools have the resources they need to support the academic, social, emotional, and well-being of our students. As we look to next school year, we're adapting our approach to provide a multi-tier system of supports for students as they return. We're focused on enhancing the school experience and accelerating student learning by elevating our focus on 4 key areas. 1, strengthening relationships between students, teachers, and families. 2, providing joyful learning opportunities that accelerate learning. 3, continue our unwavering focus on health and safety. And finally, addressing inequities. Let me dive into these areas a little bit more deeply. As it relates to the relationship building, the foundation of our work is strengthening the relationship with families, students, and teachers. For many of our families, we're hosting listening sessions this spring to learn more about what they need to feel confident in returning to in-person learning this fall. We're creating more family-focused resources, including videos to help families visualize their child back in the classroom. And we're excited to relaunch our home visit model with a recommendation that visits happen in the community or outdoors so families and teachers can build trusting relationships over the summer in alignment with our health and safety guidelines. We know our students thrive when they understand how much we care about them as individuals. Our leaders, our teachers believe in a whole child trauma-informed approach. As such, we're dedicating classroom time to build relationships through learning opportunities, elevating and encouraging student voices, and providing space in our classroom for students to practice emotional regulation techniques, setting consistent and positive school-wide behavior expectation. We also recognize the additional support that our teachers and school staff will need. This is why, for example, we are investing $5 million to provide specialized comprehensive training to help our teachers be experts in building students' resiliency. Now let's talk about the joyful learning opportunities that will accelerate learning. Building on term 4, we're excited to offer engaging and joyful in-person and virtual opportunities this summer that will prioritize students who have demonstrated a need for additional supports. New this year, we are offering our school-led Summer Acceleration Academies, which are designed in partnership with the Recovery Community Core members at each school. Parents can register for summer learning opportunities now at our DCPS reopenstrong.com website. DCPS has created a comprehensive plan to accelerate learning this fall. We want parents and community members to be able to sense this student-centered, joyful learning. Our approach is guided by best principles and emphasizes the whole child with meaningful learning opportunities and investment in student wellness. Students will be immersed in their grade level curriculum with a rich set of tools and resources for educators to make targeted interventions where there are learning gaps. We will prioritize research-based foundational literacy instruction, opportunities to build literacy skills and vocabulary development across content areas, and small group instruction within the classroom. Now, health and safety. The health and safety of our student remains a priority in all of our planning. We have proven that we can operate our schools safely during the pandemic, and we've been recognized as a national leader with our health and safety planning. As we look ahead to the 21-22 school year, we will continue to lean on the expertise of the CDC and the DC Department of Health for guidance on COVID-19. We will deploy our layered mitigation strategy, including continuing to enforce health screenings, investing in our HVAC systems, and facility upgrades, and engaging in more frequent deep cleaning practices. Additionally, we will continue to train staff on health, safety, and operational policies to ensure fidelity in practice. Lastly, as we prepare for full return to in-person learning in the fall, we know the importance of families receiving the vaccine to ensure an effective multi-layered protection strategy. We are pleased to partner with Mayor Bowser to support the distribution of the COVID-19 vaccine for our students and staff. And we've announced that we will host vaccination clinics at our schools beginning next week. Our persistent inequities. We know that COVID-19 has had an unequal impact on our families across our city. We're centering our recovery plan around addressing this inequity. DCPS is committed to taking a conscious and deliberate action to combat institutional racial inequity. Our work is focused on eliminating opportunity gaps, interrupting institutional bias, and removing barriers to academic and social success, particularly for our students of color. This school year, our teachers, our school leaders are leading this work by pioneering our anti-racist educator university, a strategic lever for equity that provides DCPS staff and is rooted in anti-racism learnings. We're also dedicated to addressing disparate outcomes from every angle. Our commitment of equity shows in many areas of our work. In a recent round of listening sessions, we prioritized hearing from our most impacted families in wards 4, 5, 7, and 8, ensuring that we are lifting up the concerns of those who may not typically have their voices elevated. Linguistic and culturally responsive family engagement has also been a key tenet of our recovery work as we prioritize town halls, meeting in Spanish with key city and nonprofit partners. We're also prioritizing equity by ensuring acceleration funds are used to address students that are most in need. And as such, we view our technology investments from an equity lens. For example, we are committing to ensuring that every student in grades 3 through 12 has a dedicated device because technology can make content accessible to students who may not otherwise have it. In the coming months, our priority to ensure that all DCPS students have a healthy and safe return to in-person learning while working diligently to accelerate student progress. We appreciate the support of Mayor Bowser and the DC's Council partnership in these critical endeavors. In a year like no other, we have consistently seen the value of our community and the resiliency of our youth. Thank you. I'm happy to answer questions from you at this time.
Thank you, Chancellor Farabee. Superintendent Young, and good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Mendelson and members of the Committee of the Whole. My name is Shauna Young, and I'm the Interim State Superintendent of Education. I'm pleased to testify before you on the Office of the State Superintendent of Education's efforts to support school reopening and academic recovery. The past year has been unlike any other experienced by students, families, and educators across the district. In response to the school closures necessitated by the coronavirus pandemic in March 2020, educators rapidly adjusted their teaching methods and families doubled down to support their children's education at home. This was a monumental effort for educators, families, and students, and I'm humbled by the perseverance and devotion demonstrated by them. The shift to remote learning was critical in our response to the public health emergency, but we know that students are best served in our school buildings with our educators. We have a unique opportunity to recover from the pandemic by reimagining education in the district and moving toward better educational opportunities for all DC students. This begins with strong planning for the year ahead and strategically investing our federal recovery funds. Today, I would like to walk you through the steps that OSSI is taking to make that a reality. Mayor Bowser has expressed her expectation that students attend in-person full-day school for 5 days per week in the 2021-22 school year. And OSSI has been working very hard to support local education agencies in their planning and recovery efforts. This work started with outlining expectations and critical priorities for the upcoming school year through an update to our guiding principles for continuous education. These guiding principles provide LEAs and families with clear and consistent expectations for serving students in person 5 days a week, as well as for offering distance learning under limited circumstances. Initially drafted and revised based on feedback from stakeholders, including DC teachers and school leaders, the principles focus on 3 recovery priorities: safe reopening, student and staff well-being, and accelerated learning. OSSI released questions for the 2021 Continuous Education Plan, which incorporates the principles. Every LEA must draft their plan, engage stakeholders on its development, and submit their plan to OSSI for review by June 30th, 2021. Once reviewed and approved, these plans will be shared publicly on the OSSI website, and LEAs must share them directly with families. Through our continuous education plan questions, we also streamlined other important work streams that LEAs must complete. To collect and share data on academic outcomes this past year, LEAs must provide school-level information on student performance on their local formative assessments. With this submission, OSSI will be able to provide some insight on the impact the pandemic has had on academic achievement. In order to ensure that our learning spaces are safe and that families and educators have confidence that they can go to school safely, OSSI will require all schools to submit these plans for review and support. OSSI will provide LEAs with extensive support as they develop their plans. We have already started to host overview webinars with LEA leaders and staff to review the major requirements of each of these plans, as well as timelines and key dates. These trainings are on topics related to developing specific sections of the plans. For example, tutoring, accelerated learning, authentically engaging caregivers, and supports for students with disabilities. Collectively, these efforts will support school and LEA planning for a strong and safe start to the 2021-22 school year. Federal relief legislation authorized the Elementary and Secondary Emergency Relief Fund to support state education agencies serving students in grades K through 12 as a response to the coronavirus disruptions. Appropriations have been made to this fund on 3 separate occasions for a grand total of over $600 million to the district, with $44 million allocated to OSSI and the rest in pass-through funds to LEAs. OSSI has provided transparent information on these allocations on our website for your reference, and I would like to give you an update on each of these appropriations made into the ESSER fund. Through the CARES Act, the district received about $42 million, with $37.8 million of that amount allocated to LEAs. This funding is already available, and the district completed its first annual report on the uses of these funds in January. You may find reported data on these expenditures on the U.S. Department of Education website. Through the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, the district received approximately $172 million, with $154 million going to LEAs. OSSI's made preliminary allocations to LEAs, and applications for those funds are available and due no later than September 30th. LEAs are developing spending plans for this funding in their applications, which OSSI is reviewing and approving on a rolling basis. Finally, the American Rescue Plan Act made a third appropriation into ESSER, of which over $386 million will be awarded to the District of Columbia. We've provided preliminary allocations and awards to LEAs, and their continuous education plans will outline how they plan to spend these funds, 20% of which at least must go towards evidence-based interventions to address the academic impact of lost instructional time. OSSI is in the process of drafting the state's plan to the U.S. Department of Education as required for the remainder of these funds. The plan template from the U.S. Department consists of 43 items covering a wide range of topics, including the state's current status and needs, plans for safely reopening schools and sustaining their safe operations, planning for the use and coordination of ARP-ESSER funds, and supporting student and teacher needs. OSSI's application will be informed by the extensive engagement that we have taken part in with this council over the past year and in routine convenings with LEA and school leaders and other stakeholders. This plan is due on June 7th, 2021, and we will publish our draft publicly on our website and continue to meet with stakeholders on it over the next several months. I would now like to speak specifically about how OSSI aims to spend its share of these funds. The federal funding that OSSI is allocated will be aligned with our relief and recovery efforts, including safe reopening, student and staff well-being, and accelerated learning. Through the CARES Act, OSSI received just over $4 million in the SEA set aside. These funds were focused on providing relief from the adverse impact of the pandemic and timely investments to jumpstart academic recovery. We also funded OSSI programming so there would not be lapses in services due to budget pressures during the pandemic. And to ensure that all schools receive recovery funds, we provided comparable funds to LEAs that are not Title I eligible, who serve learners and provide early childhood education. Through the ESSER II, OSSI will receive just over $17 million, and with the investment from ESSER III, OSSI will receive approximately $39 million. Here's how we will use these funds. To build on investments for a safe reopening, we will work to build more confidence in returning to school through training and technical assistance on indoor air quality evaluations and outdoor learning models. To support student and staff well-being, we will make significant investments to support student and educator mental health. Specifically, OSSI is investing in further expansion of the district's comprehensive school-based behavioral health system in DCPS and public charter schools. We are investing in the Department of Behavioral Health's mobile crisis team and will build LEA capacity to respond to individual student crises. We will establish a self-service interactive training platform with on-demand wellness resources available to all early childhood and K-12 educators in the district. In addition, we will make investments at the school level to support educator wellness structures and practices so it can be better prioritized in routine school operations. We will also dedicate funds aimed at building more positive school cultures. The majority of our investments will focus on programs and resources that will accelerate learning now and into the future, including at least the $19 million the federal government has directed states to spend on evidence-based interventions that respond to the academic, social, emotional, and mental health needs of students, particularly groups of students disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. To support students in catching up on valuable content over the past year and in years to come, OSSI will make a significant contribution to the city's investment in high-dosage tutoring. In addition to more time spent on learning, we must also ensure that curricula and materials that students are learning from are of the highest quality. We've identified the need to improve literacy instruction and have heard significant interest from the community to support this work. To respond, we will conduct a citywide audit of current literacy curricula and provide professional development and training on the science of reading. We will also take comparable steps in math and provide K-8 schools with a free one-year subscription to a dynamic digital math curriculum that can be used to support enrichment and acceleration. Of course, school for our students is more than English and math. It's science, social studies, arts, foreign language, and many other subjects that enrich and engage minds. We will also provide grants specifically aimed at developing and implementing coursework beyond math and ELA that meet high standards, engage our full school community, and support whole child development and engagement. As we make investments to strengthen instruction, we will also deepen our efforts to improve special education by expanding OSSI professional development for all educators through a suite of micro-credentials that we hope will provide a shared foundation of knowledge across all special education and general education teachers that help them create learning environments that set up all children to succeed. We will also invest in new resources to assist the families of students with disabilities in partnering with schools to support a successful return to the classroom and catching up on instruction and services. We know that learning does not only take place during the traditional school day or school year. OSSI will invest nearly $8 million in evidence-based comprehensive after-school and summer learning and enrichment programs to respond to students' academic, social, emotional, and mental health needs. We're also looking to the future as we determine our investments. Although this period during the pandemic has been challenging in many, many ways, it's also been a time of innovation for the delivery of education. And many of the changes to education may address some of the hardest to reach student populations, including those that are over age and undercredited, or those in the juvenile justice system. It is important to build further on these shifts strategically and with the guardrails necessary to make sure students are served well. We will establish a vision, governance framework, and implementation plan for future policy initiatives that will reflect lessons learned from the pandemic and support growth in more high-quality, flexible school models in the future in competency-based education, dual enrollment, and remote options. Finally, this year has taught us that it is critical to know and understand the progress of student learning, both in a year-end summative assessment, but also in the types of assessments schools give at the classroom level. Instruction must be tailored to the student, and it will be important to know with precision what concepts students know and do not know to better customize their learning experience. We will make investments to improve the quality and effective use of formative and interim assessments by schools to better understand and track student progress. OSSI will also use some of the funding to invest in citywide research and accelerate improvements in our data systems at the state level. The district has made tremendous investments in this work, and we plan to also use funds to build our data capacity by laying the groundwork for the collection of course and academic data in the future. This has been a time of unprecedented challenges, and now a time of unprecedented opportunity. At this moment, we can strategically steward large investments that will impact the lives of our children for years to come. Because of the pandemic, we will continue to face real challenges in the months and years that lie ahead. We will need to continue to collaborate with you and community stakeholders on further steps for implementation. However, our vision for these investments to provide direct supports to students, strengthen our foundations of learning in the classroom, invest in our educators and families, support student and staff well-being, and build systems to support the future of learning will help us not just recover, but set a new course for the future of education in the district. I would like to continue my public appreciation to our educators, families, and students for their persistence and determination this year, and for the unwavering commitment of our community to high-quality education and the belief in the potential of our children to do great things. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today, and look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Superintendent Young. Dr. Bazron.
Good morning, Chair Mendelson, council members, and council staff. I'm Dr. Barbara J. Bazron, Director of the Department of Behavioral Health. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss behavioral health services to support reopening and academic recovery. As Mayor Bowser briefly highlighted yesterday, in her proposed fiscal year 2022 budget and financial plan, $8.3 million is included to support these initiatives. These services complement the work taking place within schools under the leadership of the Deputy Mayor of Education, the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, Chancellor Farabee, and the DC Public Charter School Board. They support the return to full in-person learning and targeted services to children and families most impacted by the pandemic, as well as the trauma experienced as a result of violence in our community. Studies show that half of all lifetime mental health disorders start by the age of 14, and school-based services have proven to be an effective way to reach children and their families. Our goal is to support the conditions of learning that have been shown by the research to be linked to students' academic success, graduation, and post-secondary success. The results of this strategy may contribute to decreasing the literacy gap between Black and white students. The behavioral health initiatives will make school-based services available in every public and public charter school, provide on-site treatment services in targeted early childhood centers, expand crisis response services in our public schools, provide mental health supports for parents, and offer mental health supports for teachers. I will now discuss each initiative in more detail. First, the expansion of school-based behavioral health services. With the support of the mayor, the council, and our education partners, DBH now offers behavioral health services to nearly 71,000 students and their families in 172 of the 245 public and public charter schools. This expansion completes the mayor's multi-year investment to make behavioral health services available to every child in every public school by placing those services in the remaining 84 schools. This is a tremendous accomplishment that will have a lasting impact on the ability of our children to succeed now and later in life. Social emotional learning and mental health child education program pilots will also begin in this upcoming fiscal year. As Deputy Mayor Kine testified, the social emotional learning and mental health for early childhood education program will provide early childhood treatment services in 8 targeted child development centers in the neighborhoods most impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, either through the disproportionate death rates or positive case rates. Funds will support the training of clinicians in evidence-based interventions with proven outcomes. We expect to support up to 75 young children and their families through this program. Support for students in crisis. DBH now provides 24-hour emergency crisis services for children and youth between the ages of 6 to 17 through our CHAMPS program. Clinicians support children and youth in public schools when needed, as well as in the home or the community. We are adding an additional team of clinicians with the skills required to respond effectively to mental health crises, including the traumatic impact of the pandemic experienced by students. We also will provide continued support for families. The Family Wellness and Support Program will continue, a support program started by DBH last September to help parents and caregivers manage the multiple stressors and challenges caused by the pandemic. Wellness Wednesday is an online weekly program that has attracted over 1,000 participants and is offered in both English and in Spanish. The program also includes free consultation with clinicians without formal enrollment with DBH. We recognize that teachers may also need additional support to manage the stressors in their own lives and the new school environment. Studies have shown that the rate of depression has doubled among teachers. In collaboration with our education partners, DBH will offer weekly support groups and mental health consultation services for teachers. Face-to-face and/or virtual services will be made available to any teacher within the district. Chair Mendelson, I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. We continue to collaborate with our education partners to offer high-quality behavioral health services that support learning recovery and a healthy school environment for students to thrive. I am ready with my team to answer any questions. Thank you once again for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Bazron. We've been joined by several additional council members, so I want to remind everybody that Dr. Bazron indicated to us that she has to leave around 11 o'clock, I believe. So we will have 10-minute rounds and 2, 4, 5, 6. If we stick to 10 minutes or less, get through all the council members if they have questions for Dr. Bazron by 11. I'm going to begin. The clock is and I'm going to focus some questions on Dr. Bazron. I appreciate you being here because we really have not, as long as I can remember, had the Department of Behavioral Health before the Education Committee, even though school-based mental health is critical. I did have some questions for you based on your statement. The first is you mentioned on page, the first page of text of your statement, I think it's 5 bullet points of initiatives. And the question comes to my mind is there capacity both within DBH and in the private sector to the extent that we contract with them for this expansion of mental health services?
Yes, sir. And also I'd like to say that I am available until 11:30.
Okay.
So I can be here, Chairman, until that time. But yes, we work very closely with our 80 core service agencies within the community, which are located in all 8 wards to implement these services and supports. In addition, we have developed some special programs to recruit additional clinicians to our team. And that includes an internship program for social workers and also providing additional support to our community-based organizations so that they can hire additional supervisors for the school-based clinicians to ensure that those that are licensed graduates can participate in this activity. And so I think those kinds of activities have expanded our ability to fully implement these services.
So the short answer is capacity is not an issue.
Not at this moment.
Now, the expansion of school-based behavioral health services. So there'll be school-based mental health in each school, and that's both public and charter. I assume that's how you get to 245 schools. What does that look like? Is that a full-time professional at each school? For some schools, would it be more than one?
Yes, well, thank you for that question. Yes, there is a minimum of one full-time clinician in every school. However, we also have some schools where there was historically a clinician hired by the Department of Behavioral Health who is also there. In addition to that, some of the charter schools, the LEAs, have hired their own clinicians. And also, additionally, within the public schools, there are psychologists and also social workers. All of these individuals work together to provide a seamless system of behavioral health services to the young people who are there.
So every school will have a minimum of one,
Yes,
either through DBH or the school itself or some other source. There may be additional mental health professionals.
correct. Through DBH, there will be a minimum of one clinician in every school. And then, as I said earlier, that is augmented in many of the schools where the LEA has hired additional clinicians or there are additional staff located within the school building.
Continuing with your statement, you talk about the early childhood education pilot program. Could you say more about that? This is a new program. You said at 8 targeted child development centers, but then you said expected to support up to 75 young children. So are the resources limited to roughly 75 children, or is it however many children there would be at these 8 targeted centers?
Essentially, thank you for that. I think, as you know, that historically we have offered the Healthy Futures Program, which is a consultation program in our early childhood centers. And currently, those services are available in 62 schools. In addition to that, we are adding this new program, which will provide direct treatment services to up to 75 families in 8 centers. And so that is the current capacity that can be met with the existing resources that for that particular effort. And one of the things to note is that these centers will be focused on the areas where there has been the highest positive COVID cases and the highest death rate. And we will be working with OSSI to identify specifically which of those centers, which of the existing centers would get those services. And this is consistent with the requirements of the 0 to 3 legislation, which we are currently responding to.
I'm still a little confused.
If we exceed that need, then of course we will then meet it through our existing child provider network.
I'm still a little confused. If it's targeted at these centers, wouldn't it be whatever the need is? Why would it be limited to 75?
That is the, right now, that is the initial plan. But however, if there are children in those 8 centers that need services, they will not go without service. We will make sure that they get the treatment services they need. And as you know, Chair, any resident within the District of Columbia does have the ability to get the treatment services they need through the Department of Behavioral Health, whether it's through this program or through our core service agencies. So we'll make sure that that is addressed.
I want to back up to the school-based mental health. Funding source for this expansion, the federal funds?
The mayor has put funding in her budget to expand to the 83 schools. It is primarily local funding in terms of the expansion, and this is a continuation of the comprehensive school-based behavioral health expansion, which now has been underway for several years.
Okay, so it's local, primarily local funds.
Yes,
And I'm assuming it's recurring funds.
yes.
Now, but the mayor said 8 million, I think you said 8 million, but my staff tells me that the budget chapter says 5.8 million. Do you know?
Yes. I think that it is 5.8 million for school-based behavioral health clinicians. There are some other expenditures that are included within that 8.3 million. There are some other program activities that are included. So, for example, we know that we do have to support things like the supervision of the clinicians in those programs. And so that's an example of it. We also have programs like Wellness Wednesday that will be included in that program, our parent support program.
And the family wellness and support program, Wellness Wednesday, new as of this year. I'm sort of unfamiliar with them. I think the deputy mayor spoke of them in his.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I'm running out of time. I think I want to know
Okay.
more about those.
Okay, I can quickly share with you that this was a program that was created in collaboration with our education partners during the pandemic to address the needs of families. And Wellness Wednesdays is a parent support group which is operated virtually in both English and Spanish to help build resiliency and to provide parents with tools to address some of the stressors that they were experiencing during the pandemic.
And attracted about 1,000 participants. Is that
Yes.
1,000 online at once or?
No, over
this
that
week
was,
and
that was over multiple sessions. The average utilization per session was about 20 to 30 families.
I'm almost at the end of my time, so I'm going to turn to colleagues. Councilmember Che, if you're here, do you have any questions?
Chairman, I wanted
Yes.
just to share that the 5.8 million is the local funding allotment, and it's being supplemented with 2.2 million in federal ESSER dollars to get to the 8 million.
Thank you. That's helpful. Councilmember Che, are you here? Because otherwise I'm going to go to Councilmember Trayon White. And if
Councilmember Che had to leave, Chairman.
okay, and if Councilmember Trayon White's not here, Councilmember Bonds. I can keep asking questions if there are no council members here. Councilmember Bonds.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. To our panel, I want to thank you so very much for putting some dressing on this menu that we are most concerned with as we move into reopening our schools and understanding our summer plans. I guess, Dr. Bazron, I want to thank you so much for your testimony. It is very helpful to understand how our mental health programs will be in the schools and the services that they are providing to not just our students, but to the families and to our instructional staff. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you.
I think the chairman has been very thorough in asking questions. I just, circle some of what your testimony revealed and your response to questions, so I don't have to ask you that. But I did want to thank you very much because, as you have amply said, this universe that we're in now makes it very clear that the young people's emotional and social development is very important as to how they will ultimately obtain the skill sets that they need through academics in order to navigate their future. And so I thank you very much for that. I did want to zero in on a couple of things. I wanted to understand very clearly from the other members of our panel, I want to understand very clearly what a parent can expect in the way of a robust summer program if you are taking advantage of the summer school product. And so I don't know whether it should go to you, Mr. Kine, our deputy mayor, or to our chancellor, or maybe we need to start with OSSI, our state education office that sort of sets some standards, is my understanding. So maybe we'll start with you, Ms. Young. How do you see that summer program working?
Much for the opportunity. And as you mentioned, we're making significant investments on this through federal funding and also through local funding and at each and every LEA. Our expectations and standards for summer programming are first that they're responsive to the needs of the school community and what the school community has asked for. And I think those things could include a number of types of programming. That includes play and engagement activities, socialization for students who have been missing their peers, as well as the opportunity to be in social settings before, trust building with adults and educators, and also academic components. For the particular federal funding that we have allocated, there are standards for evidence-based instructional practices that would have to go in to academics. So that can be involved in many ways. And I think that those academic programs could take different forms. It could mean partly school, partly camp activities, or other different creative ways of integrating. And I think I may defer to the chancellor to talk more about specifics of what those examples of those programs could look like in different schools.
Yeah, thank you, Superintendent Young. Thank you, Council Member, for that question. It's important to note first that registration for our summer activities is open now. We're encouraging families to go to our Reopen Strong website to gather more information. But as the superintendent described, DCPS, and it's really a citywide approach, is to be responsive to community needs. And we know that that's going to look different at each school, which is why we launch our Acceleration Academies. So the Acceleration Academies are driven by the administration and plan with members of that school community on what's best needed for those students to accelerate not only academics, but also social and emotional development. So for example, at Deal Middle School, they designed what they call Lit Fit. So it's an opportunity for students to come and move around and get fit and have exercise, but it also is an opportunity for them to have literacy circles and deepen students' understanding of literacy. At the high school level, you'll see many of our schools have focused in on the career and technical education programming that they're offering, in addition to our traditional credit recovery that we're providing. We're also developed science and social studies units to assist in incorporating math and literacy skills. We have a science unit, for example, called a Roller Coaster Tycoon, which is an opportunity for students to build a dream amusement rides while also collaborating with their peers. The idea here is also to create an opportunity for students to interact with their peers. So some schools have organized play dates, opportunities for students to come to campus. And then finally, we have our Summer Bridge activities as well, which is an opportunity for students to come to a campus before school starts for a week or two, just to get familiar again with the expectations, the building, their peers, and also the adults within that building.
Okay, well, that's a very extensive schedule of activities. And what I gathered from your response is that it is focused on emotional and social growth. I am equally concerned with what happens, what am I supposed to learn if I am a 7th grader? How is this program going to enrich me academically? What can I take away from the experience and say, oh, I learned this new, activity. I learned how to, maybe this is from the 4th grade, but I learned how to change decimals to percentage as an example. So that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in what is it that we are expecting would be a skill that our young people learn through the summer activity and the summer programming.
That's going to look very different. Thank you for clarifying. That's going to look very different for each student. So yes, we're very focused on the social and emotional development, but also the heart of the work is academic acceleration and remediation. So for some of our students, it will be accelerating where they are. We intend to meet all of our students where they are. So we offer, for example, in the middle school level, you asked about 7th grade, we have acceleration where students can explore algebra and geometry concepts to accelerate their learning in preparation for their transition to high school. For other students, it may be catching up on some of the curriculum that was taught this school year. And that would happen through our academic acceleration academy. So each school monitors carefully throughout the year through our assessments where students are academically. And they design the opportunity for students to have high intensity tutoring, which could be one-on-one or in small groups. And they've designed opportunities for students to come in throughout the summer to focus in on those skills, either with staff at their schools or with trusted partners.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So Mr. Kind, could you please tell me what is the overarching academic expectation for a 7th grader? What is it that is the basics that you anticipate coming through the experience that the 7th grader would learn? Or at least be presented to them to learn.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this extremely important line of questioning, which gets at the content of what we are trying to deliver. And as you shared earlier, clearly we're focused a lot on social and emotional well-being and bringing kids back together and at the same time, as the Chancellor shared, we're also focused on academic acceleration. What the Chancellor was trying to say is that each student may be at a different level. I can certainly tell you that as we engage in our high intensity tutoring work across the city, and as we work with our academic recovery, our earn and learn programs, our DPR boost camps, all of the work happening at the charter schools that are running programs over the summer, we are all focused on what we think of as grade level standards. And those standards are very detailed in the way that you described. And so there are 7th grade grade level standards, there are 6th grade grade level standards. And in each instance with each child, we are interested in understanding if they're behind or at those standards. And we're focusing on ensuring that they meet those standards before they enter the next grade. It's possible some will have them and they will exceed them, but that is our approach. Across the city, I'll just say one brief addition. We know with our high intensity tutoring work and all of our tutoring partners across all of the tens of thousands of opportunities we'll have, there's a real focus on early reading skills, so our K2 reading skills, and then as the Chancellor was saying, our middle school math skills, because those are the areas that we know are in some ways most critical for the future success of young people. So we'll emphasize those 2 areas.
Thank you very much. And I am out of time. And so thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And I'm going to try for a second round. Councilmember Pinto? Councilmember Pinto? Let me just give the lineup. After her is Councilmember Allen and then Louis George. If Councilmember Pinto doesn't materialize, Councilmember Allen, are you here? You both came on at the same time. I'm going to recognize Councilmember Pinto for 10 minutes and then Councilmember Allen.
Yep, she was here first. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you all for your testimony and all of your hard work. Sorry, I just ran back when I heard you call my name. So I want to start with the conversation around high dosage tutoring. Deputy Mayor Kine, you said during your testimony that we're going to flood the city with high dosage tutoring. Can you talk a little bit about those specifics and how that's going to be implemented?
Yes, thanks. Thanks so much, Council Member. This is an area that we have been really focused on for months, as you all know, primarily because when we read the evidence about what are the interventions that most effectively help students catch up, high dosage or high intensity tutoring is really the single most effective intervention. And it requires, as the Chancellor shared, a couple meetings per week with between 1 and 4 young people in sessions that exceed 45 minutes. So it's quite specific the way that we're sort of thinking about it. We early on realized a couple things. One, the primary location of high intensity tutoring will be children's schools. That's where it's most effective, delivered by adults who know them, have access to their school records and their information. And so we realized we had to support the schools to ensure that they delivered extremely high quality, high intensity tutoring. We have a number of ways that we're doing that through OSSI and through some really trusted city partners in the private sector that are helping support this work. Secondly, we realized that we also needed to go to those non-school locations where students go in order to make sure we could touch them where they are. So we are doing that. We're doing that through DPR. We're standing up 700 seats in something called DPR boost camps. We're doing that through the libraries, and we're doing that through getting trusted tutoring partners into places like the DYRS Achievement Centers, the CFSA Family Success Centers, learning hubs that exist in some of our public housing, and so on. So we are ensuring that we've got tutoring where kids are, while at the same time we are deeply supporting the tutoring work that's happening within schools.
Thank you so much. That's great to hear. And Deputy Mayor, can you speak about the mentorship program that we heard about yesterday for our high school students to help them transition to post-secondary school? Who are the mentors going to be? Do we know how frequently they'll be meeting? What is that going to look like?
Yeah, thanks so much, Councilmember. Another extremely important area. We have been very concerned about our high school students because we know that they are in their final years of school. And if they fall off even a little bit, they'll be less likely to experience the kind of post-secondary success that is really essential to set them up well for their future lives and careers. We are really, really proud of a number of interventions, or pleased number of interventions that we've developed with schools and with listening to families that relate to strengthening the pathway of high school students to and through high school and then into their post-secondary work. So I think what you're referring to is one of those interventions, which is an overall $38 million investment in tuition assistance for our DC public school students to attend local colleges and universities. And that is complemented with mentorship, which is based, actually, I will defer to the Chancellor on this, largely on the model of DCPS's College Rising program, which couples high school students with adults based in their schools to actually support their decision-making process as they figure out what's the best path for them based on their interests and what they've shown, but also stays with them after they graduate. Because one thing we know is that even though we've got a lot of students that go on to college, many of them actually don't remain in those programs. So we are going to do this through our dual enrollment program and the mentorship that we do there in high schools, as well as through our tuition assistance program in partnership with trusted colleagues, for example, UDC.
And Councilman Pinto, can I add on that briefly?
Sure.
So DCPS established DCPS Persist during the health emergency with our class of 2020, and we'll also extend the class of 2021, where we partner seniors with a coach that provides support in their transition. In addition to that, there are many grants to support students with a laptop if they may need it, housing, other resources they may be needed for their college transition. We help them with their housing, ensure that they get to campus, and then that mentor and coaching is available to them in their secondary experience, whether they're going to work or college, which includes help with essay writing, includes additional supports with their academics throughout the school year. And the idea is to follow through to their graduation.
Councilmember, I just wanted to make one additional point if I could. We don't have a representative of the charter sector here with us, though we think all public schools are public schools, but the College Rising program, the tuition assistance, is for students at any public school. And of course, there are many colleagues in the charter sector, for example, KIP, that has KIP to and through college, that is another model for the kind of work that we will expand.
Wonderful. Thank you for that addition. Thank you both. It's an exciting program. So Chancellor Farabee, I want to speak about COVID for a moment. What are you thinking about requiring all DCPS staff to get vaccinated and requiring students above the age of 12 to get vaccinated? Where is your thinking right now on that?
Thank you, Councilmember, for that question, because we know the vaccine is one of the most important mitigating strategies that we can emphasize right now for our students and our families. We don't anticipate requiring the vaccine for staff or student at this time. However, we are highly encouraging staff and students to take the vaccine, which is one of the reasons why we're excited to partner with Mayor Bowser to offer the vaccine at our school sites beginning next week. And that includes students and staff that can walk up and get the vaccine without an appointment. We will also continue to provide other outreach to families, stressing the importance as part of our confidence building. We've heard from families that they want to hear from other students who've taken the vaccine. In fact, I heard from students, my student advisory council in our meeting on yesterday evening, that students also want to lead a campaign and champion the vaccine to encourage other students to receive the vaccine. So we will continue to, again, reach out to community members and highly encourage the vaccine. We're proud to partner with Children's National Hospital to offer a mass vaccination effort this school year for our educators.
Okay, thank you. We will all continue to encourage everybody to get the vaccine in our city. Will there be an online virtual option for families next fall?
Yeah, so DCPS, along with all schools in the city, will have a limited virtual option for those students who have a medical need to remain in remote learning. The Office of the State Superintendent of Education has released the form that families will need to take to their physician to be completed and returned to their school.
Okay, and is the absence of a vaccination, does that amount to a qualified medical need?
That is not a qualifying medical need based on the guidance that we receive from DC Health, CDC, and also local and national pediatricians. However, it's important to note that we still encourage families to get their immunizations in this summer because that is still required. So while we focus a lot on the importance of the COVID-19 vaccine, we also want families to ensure that students receive the appropriate vaccinations based on their age level to be admitted to school next year.
Okay, thank you so much. And I think I'll pose this to Deputy Mayor Kine, but if someone else wants to jump in this last minute, do we have a breakdown of DPR registrants by ward? And has there been any more conversation or progress made towards transportation options?
I can, so first of all, I don't have the breakdown of DPR participation in the summer camps, you mean, by ward, but we can certainly get that, council member, and provide it to your office. The boost camps are being stood up in wards 7 and 8 and 5. So we do know we're prioritizing students in those or young people in those areas for the boost camps. And then I apologize, I don't quite understand your last question on transportation.
Something we had talked about last hearing was if there are opportunities for kids to gather outside, particularly in some of our parks, if there are transportation opportunities for students around the city to get to those parks, especially if it's not on their in their neighborhood. But we can follow up about that as I'm out of time this round. Thanks so much. Thank you, Chairman.
I'll let the deputy mayor answer quickly and then turn to Councilmember Allen.
Currently, we are not providing transportation options to summer camps or to parks. We've worked with WMATA to ensure they've got capacity, and we know that kids have access to their Kids Ride Free cards over the summer, and so that's the approach that we're taking to the summer.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to everybody on this panel. We have a lot of hard work ahead, and I appreciate your testimony today. I'll try to move through a couple items as quickly as I can. One of the overall challenges, I think, is we need to think about the fact that you got parents that are watching this, trying to figure out what does the summer look like, what does the fall look like, and I don't know if from a communication standpoint, we're speaking as plainly that helps parents see what the school year is going to look like and help them make decisions. So I'm going to try to get a couple of questions around that if I can. One of the questions I had to, and Dr. Farabee, this would be to you, but then Deputy Mayor, if you want to jump in as well for all clusters. So 5 days a week is what we're trying to tell folks. That is our goal. That is our anticipation. That is our hope. That's our plan. Does that include aftercare? So what does the day look like for most families?
Thank you, Councilmember, for that question. We've communicated to families, we'll continue to communicate that the full schedule for next year does include before and after school care. Families should anticipate the same structure of the day prior to the health emergency with any other logistics in terms of operations for next school year. And again, 5 days a week, full time.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it. We're trying to make that as plain as we can for folks to hear, because I still hear confusion from parents around that. So thank you. In terms of the students who are gonna have a need for virtual, what's unclear to me, because I've seen different jurisdictions try to tackle this in different ways. I heard you say medical need. I think there may be some cases where it's not the medical need of that young person, but there may be a medical need in the household. So question is, how are we defining what medical need is? And then the other part of that question is the intention to create a virtual experience embedded within an in-person classroom, or as we've seen some jurisdictions, creating a virtual, whatever the right word would be, academy or a virtual class where the virtual students are in one experience and the in-person students are in a fully in-person classroom?
I can speak to the DCPS plan, and I'll let the superintendent speak more to the medical exemption and the way the form will be implemented. The way that we are planning for next school year is that DCPS will offer a DCPS virtual academy. And that virtual academy will be separate from the traditional operations of the school. However, the expectation will be that all of our teachers are teaching from their classroom, but we may have some teachers that will be teaching students virtually as a part of that DCPS virtual academy. So it will be managed centrally with leadership and the ability to communicate with families. And we will utilize teachers throughout school. So you may have a teacher from your school, you may have a teacher from another school that is teaching in the DCPS virtual academy.
Okay, that's really helpful. So just from a practical standpoint, and then superintendent, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the medical piece too, because I can think about my own kids' experience. If there is a classroom, there's going to be the in-person classroom. And then if I'm a student who has the need is in virtual, I'm in, as I think I heard you describe it, a virtual academy.
That is correct. Now, as a part of the virtual academy, the primary mode we expect would be with a virtual classroom with a teacher teaching remotely at their school. That could be a teacher, again, at their school or at another school. We also anticipate there may be unique scenarios where we would need to utilize our concurrent simulcast model for students that may have very specific course needs. So for example, if there's a student that is taking AP chemistry, or another course that has a limited number of offerings, there may be a scenario in which they would have that class with other students that are in person.
Got it. Because for an online academy to work, you need to have enough students taking that one class. So that's a good example. AP Chemistry, you may not have an entire virtual classroom full of students for an AP Chemistry class, right? Because then you have to have the teacher for that. Okay, that's helpful.
That is correct.
Thanks. Superintendent, anything you want to add on the medical need element?
Yeah, I'll also reinforce what the chancellor said, that we anticipate that this is a very limited number of students who would end up having a specific medical need that requires virtual. And so, and you know, the sophistication that DCPS is thinking about this, other LEAs will have to think about as well. And that may look different in different schools or LEAs that have different capacity. And we anticipate for that reason, virtual school may look very different. And we know that our schools are working very hard to communicate about reentry and safe reentry, and have done significant work to enable that, and to be open over the summer to walking through, to showing families. The medical form itself, to answer your question, is specifically related to a medical need of the student that requires not to be in the classroom, and asks several questions of the family and of the consulting physician who has to sign for it, about the considerations made to determine that need.
Okay, thank you. And with my remaining time here, I want to try to focus on a couple of issues around special education and how we're doing assessments. So this may be directed to OSSI. Superintendent, can you tell us what is the guidance that OSSI is going to be giving our DC schools, specifically to safeguards around either over or under identification of kids for special education needs, given both learning loss, but also the collective impact of this pandemic related trauma? What I'm concerned about is we're gonna have a lot of kids coming back who have had almost a year and a half worth of accumulated trauma. And so in what ways are you giving guidance to our schools, all of our LEAs, around how to have safeguards so that we're not also over identifying?
I deeply appreciate that question. It's a matter of significant concern and deliberation of me and my team, and in our coordination and consultation and technical assistance with our local education agencies and schools. So I think you pinpointed a significant concern. A couple of things. First, I will just say, in terms of the needs of our students with disabilities, there's a couple of really primary logistical things that we are asking our LEAs to do, which is to prioritize the evaluation and reevaluation of students with active IEPs, to ensure that they are getting the level of academic and other supports that they need to be successful and are prioritized in their evaluation. We are also investing in significant amount of educator training about trauma-informed teaching, learning, and care, and requesting specifically in our continuous education plans how LEAs are working with their staff and their school culture to have safe spaces for management, for building relationships, for trauma-informed practices in discipline and in identification, to limit exactly what you're talking about there, and to provide appropriate social outlets and norms for processing so that those things are not misidentified as disabilities. We all know that many students will have work to make up, both in socialization and in academics. And it's our priority on sort of what we call like our tier 1 and tier 2 interventions to make sure that those things are addressed in a broad way and in a whole school, whole child informed way, before there are assumptions made about behaviors that may be disabilities. And then if and when appropriate, evaluated in a timely way so that those students can get what they need.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
Dr. Bazron, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to just add that our school-based behavioral health clinicians provide a range of prevention services that all children within the classroom certainly can access. Some young people may have stress and anxiety that doesn't raise to the level of a treatment need, but that prevention process will help them in terms of healthy decision making, being able to share what their experiences are, to be able to develop skills around resiliency within the classroom. And so
Right.
that's
but Dr. Bazron, I guess, but we'd agree though that we need more of that than we normally have, right? Like this is not going to be a year. So
Yes.
that's part of what I'm trying to get at too, is in what way, and I appreciate
Yeah.
both you and superintendent, being focused on this, because we got to amp up the ability and need to meet the needs, but then also, as the superintendent's talking about, have those safeguards so that we are not misidentifying and misassessing along the way. Real quickly, the superintendent as well, is the current protocol for making an educational neglect report to CFSA expected to remain in place in the upcoming year?
Yes, yes. I mean, our protocols have been in place throughout the pandemic and will continue in terms of the reporting procedures to CFSA. And as we mentioned, as the deputy mayor mentioned, the city is also making more significant investments in support staff for re-engagement broadly soon to hopefully avoid some of those situations for attendance in the future.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, if I can just make sure I clarify so that I heard the right thing. In other words, we're going to keep the guidance that we don't make the report if you've had contact with the family within the last 10 days, rather than the previous 10 unexcused absences.
No, that may be a misunderstanding of the procedure. I think there's a difference also in the procedure of unexcused absences and reporting on truancy, and the difference between truancy and educational neglect specifically, which has to do with a specific standard that CFSA sets for the kind of intervention that a family may receive. So I'm happy to follow up more specifically because those things sort of triage into different ways, but the reporting has always been intact related to students who have unapproved absences, but I'm happy to follow up with more detail.
Okay. Yeah, I know I'm out of time. So yeah, we can follow up to make sure we get that specifically. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Councilmember Lewis George.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you for all the witnesses for being here. I will forgo the opening statement and get directly to the questions. Deputy Mayor, I wanted to start with you sort of on questions around the vaccine and COVID at the time. Do you know what percentage of residents aged 12 to 18 are vaccinated?
I don't have that number. I do know that we have 50% of our residents are fully vaccinated, and 70% or just above 70% have received at least one shot. We're still gathering the data, as I understand it, on the 12 to 18, but I'll be happy to follow up with you with colleagues from DC Health.
Okay. And can you say more about the DC Health vaccine exchange and how charter schools can serve as vaccination clinics? We've heard from several Ward 4 schools that would like to have that opportunity.
Yeah, so this is a new program that DC Health is helping to coordinate, which we're very excited about as we stand down some of the big central DC Health run vaccination sites as demand for those specific services decreases. We are standing up these community-based vaccination centers through the DC exchange, as you mentioned, and as I mentioned in my testimony. And the idea there is that if you are interested as a community location in hosting a vaccination site, you simply need to contact the exchange. I'll be happy to take some of those requests myself if you've got specific folks that you want to connect with me directly to make a connection, and they can then serve as sites.
Okay, perfect. I got a few Ward 4 locations that want to be involved. My last question for you, I was really happy to see about the Safe Passage microtransit. This is something that we, transit schools and how these flow together. I know the mayor's presentation yesterday said there's about 6.1 million for a new microtransit program. Could you sort of talk about that what that microtransit program would look like? Is that in DME's budget, or is that Department of for hire vehicles? And then in addition to that, can you provide us a list of pickup and drop off points for this program?
Thanks, Councilmember, for that question. Yes, we're very excited about this program. I will say at the outset of my response that we are still relying primarily on our Kids Ride Free program. And as I mentioned before, working closely with WMATA to ensure safe and healthy protocols and capacity to help students. So that's, in the first instance, our primary strategy is still that. In addition, we are investing $6.1 million this coming year into the Department of For-Hire Vehicles. So that's where the budget will flow, to establish a series of these microtransit sites for all 24 school locations in our Ward 7 and 8 safe passage areas. So it's specifically focused on kids who are attending schools in Ward 7 and 8 safe passage areas that we consider the kids maybe most at risk as they travel to and from school. This will work a lot like the current Neighborhood Connects program that the For Higher Education programs runs, where you've got a dedicated van and it can make multiple loops. The schools themselves will determine the drop-off and pickup points for their students based on the students that they are interested in having participate. So this is very school-focused and very flexible.
Okay, great. That's great to hear. And I'm sure schools are going to be really happy to utilize that. So thank you, Deputy Mayor. I want to go over to, I guess I'll go over to Aussie for a second. Superintendent, I wanted to ask just a few questions. One, I know the guiding principles for education say LEAs can only offer distance learning if there's been a COVID outbreak, if a student or staff are excluded from school due to confirmed or suspected COVID, or if a student has a medical certification. Is there a list of medical certifications that will be used to determine who's eligible for distance learning? And if so, is there a way we can get a copy of this form? I'm just trying to get a sense, is there a list of what medical conditions do or don't qualify?
Yeah, thanks so much for that question. The medical consent and certification form should be on OSSI's website, and I can follow up with the specific link following the hearing. There is not, the CDC nor DC Health or any existing medical authority does not have a list of any condition that precludes a student from attending school. The intent of the form is for the family to consult with a physician if there is something that in the physician's medical judgment deems a student to require to not participate in in-person school.
Okay. And I was pleased to see $4 million in capital investments in data systems infrastructure. As always, I think you already know what my question here is going to be. Will this work to include work towards OSSI collecting student courses, grades, and teacher linkages, and what sort of benchmarks are we expecting to achieve within the fiscal year 2022?
Yeah, thanks so much. We're also really excited about investments that the mayor and the city is making in our data systems. We're investing on both local capital funding as well as some of our ESSER funding in those systems, which we've had a lot of conversation about to accelerate our work already in progress. Some of that will be in speed and efficiency of reporting. Some of that will be laying the groundwork for coursework. Grades is not something likely that our state systems will ever capture, but the coursework foundation and teacher linkages is something. I do not anticipate that at the end of the next fiscal year, we will have collections, but we will be making progress on the standards, on setting that infrastructure and in further guidance on how to make those steps in another year or two from there. We've said, and even in previous testimony, this is a multi-year project, but I think this is an enormous investment towards that goal, and we're really excited to move forward. And we'll be working with our team on more specific tactical plans as we balance out the investments, but we're very excited to move forward on it.
Okay. When do you, I know you said it won't be done by end of fiscal year 22. When do you think it will be done?
Yeah, I appreciate the request for a very specific timeline. I do not have that right now. I think we've always said it's a multi-year project, but that's true for many of these things, and we're committed to making it happen.
Okay. I wanted to get a sense of where we can see the high dosage tutoring investments in the budget. I know the mayor's presentation yesterday said there would be 111.8 million federal supports for learning acceleration. Is there a way we can understand, I guess, the providers associated with each school in LEA?
I'll defer to the deputy mayor to talk more about the broad strategy, but it will be a multi-pronged strategy of investments in third-party providers. Probably some of it will be to many providers that exist and potentially other grants and contracts, as well as investments in schools themselves to support models in schools of highest need, as well as some research data infrastructure and technical support for that development.
Okay. And then I want to get a sense of, I was really pleased to see that we have a $19 million enhancement to the child care subsidy program. which will help providers, I think, have confidence in a full capacity reopening this fall. Is this intended to be an enhancement to subsidy rates, or is this part of a sort of line item increase intended to cover other initiatives associated with childcare and educator needs in the city?
We actually have a very broad spectrum of childcare investments. I can talk about some of them now and also in our upcoming budget hearing. There's enhancements to the subsidy rate, which are just rate enhancements.
Okay.
Much of which is coming from federal funding, but potentially not only. And there are significant investments in emergency relief grants, as well as other types of programming separate and apart from the subsidy rate.
Okay, awesome. With my 1 minute left, I want to come to Chancellor Fairby, and it's Ward 4 specific as always here. What HVAC repairs remain to be done? And I'm thinking about Powell Elementary School, particularly that hasn't had functioning heat or air conditioning all year. I imagine reopening schools means we're going to have HVAC repairs across the system. So I just want to get a sense of where we are to be ready to reopen in the fall.
Yeah, thank you, Council Member, for that question. We will continue to partner with Department of General Services to ensure that our summer work, as we typically do, is done with proud in the mayor's budget. There's dollars for $1.57 billion over 6 years, which includes modernization and small caps projects. We have put measures in place to continue our HVAC enhancements as related to COVID mitigation, along with continuing to make updates to our HVAC system so temperatures are put in place that are comfortable for students and staff. There will be a large effort again over the summer to ensure that any repairs or updates to HVAC systems that need to be made are made in a timely manner.
Okay, and that includes Powell Elementary.
Yeah, so we're keenly aware of some of the current concerns that have been raised around Powell, and we have a plan to ensure that they continue to have the appropriate conditions for their learning environment.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Lewis George. I saw Councilmember Che appear. If you have questions.
I do have some. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was here, as you know, at the outset, but had to step away for another meeting. But and so I don't necessarily want to ask questions that are redundant here, but so I'll focus in the first instance on personnel. We know that students who will need services will be far higher than ever before. And earlier this month, we learned that Arlington County was rolling back some of its summer enhancement programs because they didn't have enough teaching staff. So I'm just wondering, have we firmly secured the summer teaching staff, the tutors that we need to do all that we hope to do? I don't know who can help me there, but.
Yeah, I can speak to DCPS. So we're excited about our summer offerings. And I think the beauty of our summer offering, our plan is that we rely a lot on school-based planning for our recovery community core teams. So as a result, many of the teachers at the school were a part of the planning process and are prepared to support the plan. So we will rely heavily on teachers from the school who know the students and have relationships with them. We will also continue to rely on partners. So we have partners that we have long history with, such as Literacy Lab, Saga Math. All of those partners will continue to support us as well as our staff in the school to provide our high intensity tutoring and other academic supports over the summer. We've already started the hiring process. We feel confident in the hiring process and don't anticipate there's a need to change our plans at this time.
So you think that there'll be enough teachers and tutors and people that we need for the summer and the fall? Have you actually done a survey and taken, the data that is available to you, and you know this as a fact?
Yes, so we monitor our numbers on a weekly basis. It is a part of our data analysis that we do on an ongoing basis to prepare for summer. We have over 660 teachers that have already accepted offers. We'll continue to have offers accepted throughout the late spring, early summer, and going into next school year. But we have no indication that we're off track in terms of the number of adults that we'll need to support summer along with our partners. So I'm confident where we are and with our hiring process.
In that same vein, about a third of the schools in Ward 3 are losing their principals. Principals who've been with us, very effective, wonderful principals, been with us a long time, that they're leaving. And I imagine that throughout the district, there have been a number of people leaving and principals and so on. Can you bring me up to date on how we're going to respond to those departures? Because this is highly unusual, particularly in my ward.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember, for that question. So we're excited that our principals continue to return year in, year out. And in fact, the number of principals that are in transition is actually down from the previous year. So we haven't seen an increase in that number. However, we know that there are a number of different reasons why individuals do need to transition. We have a rich process that is heavily rooted in community engagement. We're currently in the process now of our community panels. I am in fact interviewing a number of candidates next week that have been submitted for interview as a part of the panel process, and we anticipate naming principals in June. Any transitions that we would have that would be announced after this point, we would typically have an interim principal that would serve throughout the school year, but we don't anticipate, again, a massive number of transitions ahead of the school year. And the community members have been excited about the number and the quality of candidates that have been put forth as a part of the panel process.
Well, that also leads me, again, staying, in the context of personnel, we have heard from others, during the hearings that we've had so far, that we have to be careful not to neglect our teachers, because they too may need extra supports, emotional supports and other kinds of supports, because they too may have been facing a kind of burnout or emotional stress and that sort of thing. Do you have specific plans to make sure our teachers are healthy?
Absolutely. This is very important to us. And in fact, we've been lifting it up at This is Mental Health Awareness Month. We recently had a summit for staff to best understand what their needs are, but we're excited that we recently launched a wellness center that is very much so focused on staff. It provides rich learning opportunities for staff to be trauma responsive for themselves, and self-care as a part of that conversation. But we have $5 million dedicated to staff development, which we believe is critical to adults being good for themselves before they can be great for students. We also have a number of our community-based partners that provide strategies and tools for our staff members as well. In addition to the Wellness Wednesday that Dr. Bazron mentioned earlier, that staff has appreciated. So we are very much so focused on ensuring that we're caring for our staff. And our DC Educator Wellness Center that we recently launched is a citywide effort that we are excited about, and we know that educators will take advantage of.
Okay, and I assume that there's good communication with our teachers and staff about all of these resources that are available to them. I see Ms. Bazron is nodding, yes, so that's good. Okay, the other thing I wanted to raise, again, I'm going to stay in this area of personnel. I noticed from the budget that some schools in Ward 3 and maybe elsewhere throughout the district, instead of having full-time librarians, they're going to have something identified as librarian techs. I think that, many schools will need enhanced personnel, but there's a basic level of personnel that all schools need. And for me, that includes a librarian, a regular librarian. So can you tell me why we're not having a librarian in every school?
Yeah, thank you, Councilman, for that question. I agree in the value of our school librarians. And in fact, we've seen an increase in the number of school librarians in our schools. And as a son of a school librarian, I had the opportunity to see firsthand their work and the benefits. Prior to this administration, there has always been a practice of allocating school librarians to each school as a part of our school-based model for how we allocate resources, which is called a comprehensive staffing model. So each school receives a school librarian as a part of that process based on their enrollment and the size of their population. However, as a part of our budgeting process, we do offer and value the ability for local schools advisory teams and principals to make decisions about personnel that are unique to their environments. And one of the strategies that we have implemented is giving schools the flexibility of how they utilize these resources. So schools have flexibility over a number of positions and have decided to restructure, but we will continue to monitor how those positions are repurposed this year and going forward to ensure that library services are strong for each student. And we have the same expectation regardless of how they structure their supports for each school in terms of access to library services.
Well, let me just say that speaking for myself and perhaps, I don't know, for whomever else, but I disagree with the idea that librarians are expendable or they should be shuffled or negotiated away. They should be part of the package that every school gets. And you shouldn't put the principals in this position of trading off this teacher or that benefit or whatever and a librarian. It should be baseline. So that's just my opinion. And also, you did not answer, what are these library tech people? Who are they?
Yeah, so I want to be clear that each school does receive baseline librarian service positions. So that is provided to each school in a very equitable way in schools.
But they shouldn't be negotiated away. That shouldn't be an option.
Yeah, and that is something that we'll continue to reevaluate. We have many positions where there's flexibility, and we do honor the autonomy of school-based decision-making as relates to what's best for that particular learning environment. The position you reference is a paraprofessional position that some schools have utilized to add additional support to their library services.
Who are they? What are their credentials? What are they? Who are they?
Yeah, so the credentials for those individuals could vary by schools, but however, the techs are responsible for primarily operations, and they do a lot of supports with teachers in terms of students and staff having access to materials and technology.
All right, I'm out of time. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember. I do want to note for the council members and I guess everybody else, the weekly COVID call is taking place now. And there are a few council members there. There's going to be another round of questions. Councilmember Henderson is next. I'll turn to her and then we'll start the second round. Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. It's like the whole crew is here. I wanted to ask a couple of quick questions. And actually, I wanted to start with you, Chancellor Fairby. This actually came up at a hearing earlier this week around how schools and everyone essentially will have to sort of adjust from having significant amount of autonomy in terms of school at home versus what school in the school building will look like. For instance, a kid doesn't have to ask for permission to go to the bathroom or doesn't have to ask for permission to get some water. But we know that these are some things in terms of school culture and school discipline that in a school setting, have been issues in the past. And I'm curious in terms of the conversations you all are having with school leaders around what that transition should look like. Is what we don't want to see is some increased amount of, school discipline referrals for things that kids have been able to do for the last 14 months by themselves.
Yeah, thank you for that question. It is definitely a topic that's come up in our listening sessions that we have with families. I think the most important point to our plan is we're tailoring our plans to meet students where they are. We want them to have a strong sense of belonging to the classroom and their schools, acknowledging that the school is the optimal learning environment. And so what you should anticipate, families should anticipate, is the first few weeks of school is renorming and reconnecting through deep joyful learning experiences. We are giving schools guidance of how to structure that. They should also expect more one-on-one time and small group time for academics or social and emotional development. And you're right, there will be times where we need to start our day in just routines and expectations, but we don't anticipate a large shift in discipline. We've seen tremendous results in return to school for those students that are back in school this year. We anticipate the same process with our students as they're coming back next year. And our principals in our school recovery teams, I can't say enough about the school-based planning and how schools are leaning in collectively around what are the things that need to happen in their building to build back relationships. And we're also hearing from families that they want to hear from us and see what the health and safety protocols are, which is why schools are spending a lot of time with visuals and testimonies and other information on the specifics of their health and safety environment.
Well, that's something actually I wanted to pick up on because, you know, at the hearing that we had with some Ward 7 and 8 families, and we were sort of asking specifically, like, what would it take for families to trust the environment again, especially knowing in terms of like the COVID protocols that we have now, parents aren't allowed inside of the school building. So it's good to hear that schools are going to be doing virtual tours or other types of things to try to help families feel comfortable with like sending your child into a building you might not have ever been into before, and what that looks like. Are you all planning some type of bridge orientation, particularly for your early childhood grades, so the pre-K 3, pre-K 4, kindergarten?
Yes, there will be bridge opportunities across K through 12. Opportunities for students to come back on campus and become familiar with the learning environment, especially for those students who haven't been on that campus. This will be their first time. We don't want August 30th, which again, the first day of school, we're eager to have students back to be the first time in their building. I think about the experience I had this week. So I had the pleasure of visiting LaSalle Bacchus. And on Wednesday, they held a orientation session for families. They're not in person right now, but just to come on campus and have some movement with DC Scores have been a great partner, but also just to walk the building, for students to walk the building with their parents and guardians to see what the hand washing routines are, what the routines are for lunch, what the routines are for access to the playground, and how students will interact with peers and adults. It was just great for parents and guardians to see that, you know, we have strong compliance with face covering, which was a question, you know, does everybody wear their mask? So we will continue to see those types of activities across our schools this spring and summer. And as you mentioned, the ability for families to do tours in person and to also hear from students and parents who already have their children in person.
Okay. I actually want to switch to the superintendent here because, you know, I know DCPS has seats available. I've heard from a number of families, particularly in the pre-K 4 arena, who were not matched through My School DC. And partly that was because they made a choice to not enroll their kid in pre-K 3 because they wanted an in-person option. And then, you know, entering the lottery for pre-K 4 means that you have less seats available. For the families that are choosing to continue their children in a childcare center setting, what will the reimbursement rates look like for that for next year? Are they, do they still get the enhanced pre-K, I forget what it's called, but I think you know what I'm talking about.
I think there's a couple of different programs we have. So if you're talking about the child care subsidy program, or you're talking about the pre-K and the pre-keep program, the pre-K.
The second one, yes.
The pre-keep program will continue to operate at full steam next year. Again, we're encouraging all folks to come in person. In person, pre-K 3 and 4 is operational, and pre-keep as well. And if I can just quickly to your previous point with the chancellor, I just think it is also a collective effort. We are asking our charters to do the same thing that DCPS is doing in terms of demonstrating their plans for welcoming families. And I think it is a collective effort of all of us as well to elevate those voices and the opportunities to come and see our schools, to put it on all avenues that our communities may see it. And I just encourage council members to work with us in the education cluster and individual schools in your wards to amplify those opportunities for families to re-engage over the summer, because it really is going to be a step-by-step process of that trust building and engagement so that we can be ready for August 30th. So
yeah, I mean, I have a number of families. I agree with you on that. I do have a number of people who like reach out on social media, et cetera. They were like, we haven't seen any plans. And I'm like, but they're available. But, you know, this is something that we haven't done very well across the government, I would say. In some ways, we need to sort of step up how we communicate with families. And frankly, there is a lot of just anxiety that it's not going to happen in August, that something is going to happen this summer and we all are going to say, oh no, we're not doing in-person instruction 5 days a week, right? I had a meeting with a group of parents, I think it was at Oyster Adams, and they were just like, we're just really concerned that everybody's gotten comfortable with only teaching 4 days a week, that they're going to just drop a day. And I was like, no, the communication has been 5 days a week, but you know, it is going to require us to build up some trust here, especially since over the last year, you know, we had some starts and stops, right? We said we were coming back and we didn't. And then we did, but it wasn't for everybody. And so we're just going to have to kind of work through those particular issues. I'm trying not to dip into sort of budget questions, but Deputy Mayor Khan, you're here. And, you know, late night, last night, sort of looking through the budget, I noticed that sort of tucked into your particular budget is a $500,000 grant for enhanced training for school resource officers and school security. And we know that over the past year, the relationship that young people have to police officers, or sort of their view of police and schools, has kind of changed. And I'm curious, I know it's federal funding, but specifically what type of enhanced training is happening with that money? If you
I think, Councilmember, is such an important area of work for us, which is the youth safety. And we spent a lot of time listening to particularly our high school students. And one of the things they shared with us pre-pandemic, but also during the pandemic, is that sometimes in their interactions with various security personnel, WMATA Transit Police, some of the SROs, they felt as though the security personnel weren't always handling the situation in a way that de-escalated it.
Yeah. And
so what we put into the budget this year, and in fact, I think it's it's $500,000 for this grant. And by the way, we worked with the WMATA Transit Police head and with the SRO head and so on, who are very excited about this. It's training in de-escalation and conflict resolution to ensure that every person who works in those positions, when they're interacting with a bunch of young people, that they are in the first instance being very preventative, and they have the skills and tools they need to ensure that they are de-escalating whatever the conflict is. So that's the purpose of the training.
Okay. All right. We'll talk more on that in budget hearings later. Director Bazron, I have questions for you, but I don't have enough time. So I'm gonna have to catch you when I catch you in the Committee on Health. But I appreciate all of you being here and for your testimony, and for I wanna say the continued work that the staff at all of your agencies have been putting in over the last few weeks to last few months, frankly, to ensure that we have a smooth transition come the fall for all families and students. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. So we're going to begin the second round of questions. I don't know how many council members will be coming back since there is that weekly call. I did want to begin with this. So as you know, we've had, and this is actually more of a statement than a question. We've had 3 hearings this week. This is the third of 3 hearings. In the first hearing on Monday, we heard from some experts on different issues such as IT, parental engagement or family engagement, and vaccine hesitancy. And the testimony regarding vaccine hesitancy I thought was particularly interesting. There were a couple of doctors who testified, and one of them spoke of 4 categories of individuals who are hesitant to be vaccinated. In one of those categories, she labeled cost anxious. And she defined cost anxious as not just being monetary, She noted that the vaccine, I believe, is pretty much free in the district, but a lot of people apparently don't realize that. So they think there's a cost. So dealing with cost hesitancy in that sense is making it clear that it's free, but also cost in terms of time and transportation. Those were other examples. And so, as I said, I don't really have a question here. It's more of a statement. Because the schools are going to be vaccine sites beginning, I think the chancellor said next week. That's good because that makes it easier. But I don't know that the schools are going to be open to the neighborhoods as opposed to the community centers, as opposed to, I'm sorry, the school community. That's what I meant to say. And so I think that with regard to opening in the fall, it's clear that one of the issues is vaccine hesitancy or how the lack of everybody being vaccinated. And we know east of the river, this percentage is something like 20% have been vaccinated. We want to get more people vaccinated. And so we need to look to ways that that vaccine is more convenient in the community, in the neighborhood, maybe even next door, to exaggerate slightly. So I think more needs to be done to make sure that schools aren't the only places in the community, and to see if the schools can be open to the neighborhood and not just the school community. There wasn't a question there. I did have a question, one more question for Dr. Bazron about, and this actually also implicates OSSI, the mobile, I have to find the question, the mobile crisis team. In OSSI's testimony, it was indicated that OSSI is investigating in DBH's mobile crisis team. Does this mean that OSSI is going to intra-district funds over to DBH? How much of this will be funded by DBH? How much of this is simply an expansion within DBH's own program, and how much of it is actually OSSI intra-districting? Dr. Bazron, you want to start first?
It is an inter-district. To us, it's for the CHAMPS, another mobile crisis team. And as you know, we have had children's mobile crisis teams for a number of years, and they provide 24/7 emergency crisis support for children and youth, either in their homes, in the community, or in the schools.
Superintendent Young, do you want to add to?
No, I think it's the answer is both. OSSI it will be using some of its federal fund to inter-district for the expansion of that program at DBH.
Correct.
And it's just for one unit?
Yes, it's for one additional team. We already have CHAMPS teams that are currently operational. We have 3 teams now.
Okay.
OSSI will be spending, I was just going to say, OSSI will be spending some of the rest of its funding for other types of training at schools individually, separate and apart from the CHAMPS program, to ensure that there is also additional capacity and assistance for schools to respond for and beyond the need for CHAMPS.
CHAMPS, which I assume is an acronym for something, and that costs $500,000.
Yes, it's the Child and Adolescents Mobile Crisis Team, and it is operated by the Department of Behavioral Health. We have a contractor who actually is operating the 2 existing teams right at this moment.
Thank you. I'm going to move to a different line of questioning. The second of our 3 hearings this week, we focused on hearing testimony from parents and others in wards 7 and 8. And I got into a little bit of trouble with that hearing because I tried to provoke some discussion and said, well, why shouldn't the parents in schools in wards 7 and 8 be treated the same as the schools and parents in wards 2 and 3? The purpose of my question was to provoke some answer there, and I did get some answer. So I'm going to focus this one on the chancellor. How are you treating the schools in wards 7 and 8 differently with the coming budget, with the coming school year?
Thank you, Chairman, for that question. As I shared in our testimony, we believe it's really important to hear directly from families in our communities where we know there's been disproportionate impact to COVID-19. So we've had specific listening sessions in Ward 7 and 8 to best understand what families are needing, especially around the confidence in returning to school next year, and also any concerns they have around health and safety. It's also important to note that our allocation of resources is rooted in a equity lens in how we've allocated dollars to schools. And so, for example, in our budget assistance, the largest proportion of dollars were issued to schools in Ward 7 and 8. We also have enhanced our partnerships in Ward 7 and 8. We believe that the connection between the school-based organizations and individuals living directly in those communities collaboratively and collectively have the best opportunity supporting those families. We also know that the highest percentage of students that are identified as at risk are also in those communities, which is why we've allocated our acceleration funds based on the formula that recognize that need and provides additional dollars for those students that are identified as at risk.
Now, you mentioned, Chancellor, listening sessions. Were you personally in those listening sessions, and how many?
Yeah, so DCPS has provided an opportunities for families to give feedback. So one of the ways that I participate directly is having the ability to host a rich conversation with our advisory groups, which includes families that are in Ward 7 and 8. We had a number of also parent university sessions that targeted families in Ward 7 and 8. And also we had 12 listening sessions, which included languages such as Spanish and others in communities where we know that there were families with other languages. Myself and our team worked really hard to ensure that we're always participating and listening carefully in these sessions to best understand what the needs are of family. And it was important for me to listen in this week at the hearing session that was held specifically for those families in Ward 7 and 8.
You were listening in on the hearing we held.
That is correct.
But the listening sessions, it sounds like you personally haven't been to those. And you said there was an advisory, there's an advisory session, advisory something?
Correct. So we always, in all of our advisories, we always work to ensure that there is strong representation from Ward 7 and 8. And if there is a listening session that I am not able to attend due to other commitments, we always ensure that there is another representative from DCPS. But I've also had the pleasure of participating in community-based conversation. For example, most recently at Anacostia neighborhood community conversation, and also the education ward conversation. So for example, I participated in the Ward 7 Education Council. I think these are other great opportunities for me to hear directly for constituents in Ward 7 and 8.
Now, in your statement, Chancellor, you mentioned this was near the end, our commitment to equity shows in many areas of our work. And then you said, for example, we're committed to ensuring every student in grades 3 through 12 has a dedicated device because technology can make content accessible to students who might not otherwise have it. And I have to say my reaction when I heard that was, that's more about equality, which is a good thing, but not equity. We know that there are greater IT challenges in neighborhoods east of the river, some other neighborhoods in the city. And I would say that's more of an equity issue. What are you doing? I actually have some IT questions. Maybe I should segue into that. What are you doing extra for these areas where there's where there are IT limitations, either in bandwidth or accessibility?
Yeah, so for accessibility, we provided students with not only a device, but also hotspots as needed to ensure that they have access to the internet. We are also enhancing our tech support We did see that there were greater needs for tech support in Ward 7 and 8. And so we're adding that additional capacity. That's a part of our federal recovery investment. We're adding in $8.3 million that's very specific to tech support. We're also enhancing the infrastructure in the school to ensure that the Wi-Fi is accessible, or if there needs to be updates to whiteboards and facilities, we're also ensuring that that is updated. Specific to Ward 7 and 8 is our outreach to ensure that we are utilizing our community action teams, community-based organizations in Ward 7 and 8 and others to assist us with assessing where there is digital divide. And we are able to respond with device and also access. And then we partner with Octo to reach out to families directly. And we also have a text, phone, and email feature for families to solicit support when there's ever a concern around technology.
I think the timekeeper ran a faster clock on me. It looks like I'm out of time. So I'm going to turn to colleagues and I'll have a third round. I'm not sure there'll be a third round for everybody. I don't believe Councilmember Henderson is here right now. Councilmember Lewis George. You need to unmute.
Oh, thank you. I was trying to get to Director Bazron before she had to leave. So thank you. Dr. Bazron, just a few questions before you have to head off. I know during the DBH coordinating council meetings, the CBOs have admitted, struggling with referrals during pandemic, and asked for more money and assistance. How do we know the 8 million more would help improve services and add more clinicians, given that I think they've already received grants over the past 4 years? And what are we doing regarding sort of the CBO struggling and the $8 million plus the millions they've kind of already received in grants?
Well, I think, first of all, thank you for that question, Council Member. We've done a number of things to support our community-based organizations who hire our clinicians that go in our schools. One of the things, as you know, we also have a community of practice that is actually facilitated by George Washington University that really helps the clinicians in terms of best practices with everything from actually what services should be provided, what evidence-based practices should be provided, how to work effectively in schools, how to engage families of children who might be in need of mental health services and supports. And so I think that there are a variety of things that we're currently doing. We, as you know, quality of care is extremely important to all of us. And like similar to what Chancellor Farabee said, I have also held listening sessions with parents. So I can get some sense of their needs and how we can better address their needs in care. I think that one of the things that's been very successful has been working in the virtual environment and providing telehealth services, reports to families. Families have found that to be enormously convenient. As you know, they have really utilized our Wellness Wednesdays and our parental support program. So we are really providing ongoing technical assistance and support to all of the clinicians that are there. And the additional dollars, the additional $5.8 that are specifically for the clinicians that will go in the 83 schools will be used to fully expand this program to every school, every public school within the District of Columbia.
Okay.
And that is our goal.
Great. And so a sort of follow up to that, I know there is sort of, I know you said DBH, there's a DBH clinician in every school. And so when you say that, do you mean a DBH and a CBO or just a DBH clinician?
No, thank you.
And sort of what's the difference for those who
Right.
may not understand that? Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that question. We have had school-based behavioral health in the District of Columbia for over 20 years.
Mhm.
This was pre-expansion. And so at that time, we had clinicians that were hired by DBH and were part of our employee corps who were actually in the schools providing that service.
Right.
In addition to that, when the expansion began, when Mayor Bowser's school expansion program began, the decision was made to place one a clinician in every school that was then hired by the community-based organization.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, right, the CBOs. So in some schools, we have a CBO clinician and a DBH clinician. Actually, there are 50 schools in which there is that overlap. The
Okay.
decision was made not to pull out those original DBH clinicians because of the disruption that it could cause to service. And these are schools with really, if you look at those 50 with high needs.
Okay. And sort of is there a difference in, I guess, qualifications for DBH clinicians or versus
No.
CBO clinicians? No?
No, there is no difference in that. And we all use a public health approach, which is prevention, intervention, and treatment and follow-up services across the spectrum.
Okay. And then one of the things I think we always are going to need more, just given what we've been experiencing here. So I understand that there was some issue in, I guess, hiring and retaining clinicians, and that's been sort of difficult as for CBOs. What is DBH doing to ensure we have, I guess, consistent, high quality clinicians in this position, given the retention within the CBOs?
I think that, and this was, thank you very much for that question. We have done a couple of things to and support the recruitment and retention of clinicians. One of the things we've done is we have established an internship program so that we can get people who may be interested in school-based behavioral health into that field of study. The other thing we've done is we are offering additional supports to our CBOs so that they can hire supervisors of the clinicians on a 1-to-6 ratio. And the reason for that is there are a lot of licensed graduates who still need to have paid supervision for several years before they can sit for their final LICSW examinations.
Okay.
And so this is another incentive for our licensed social workers to join this particular program. That's a really big deal.
Okay. And are we partnering with any of our local universities around this?
Certainly, we do around the internship programs. We are here again. George Washington University is a very, very active partner, and they offer our community of practice support.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. And so just last thing on this piece, just because I want to make sure we have enough DBH clinicians in each of our schools.
Right.
Is there any, and maybe we don't need a change in strategy, or maybe we do, regarding the CBOs versus DBH clinicians? Is there any reason why we should not just give most of our money to DBH, school mental health, or, you know what I mean? Like, instead of CBOs, if we're having sort of this retention issue with CBOs, we could just hire right within DBH and get more DBH clinicians out.
Well, thank you. This is a question that the School-Based Behavioral Health Council has really addressed. And one of the things that we are doing is really making sure that there's the seamless integration between the DBH clinicians and the CBO clinicians. And we continue really to support consistency across the entire spectrum. And so at this point, we plan to move forward with the plan that we have that has been adopted and recommended by the Behavioral Health Planning Council for our school-based behavioral health program. And And as you know, one of the things that we also will be doing after we have a clinician in every school is then looking at what kind of need-based strategy we need to have to ensure that the right resources are there for the people who are there. Before at this point, Mr. Chairman, I do want to say that I will have to leave the session. I want to thank you and the council members for providing me with this opportunity to participate in this activity today. I have to tell you that the partnership between all of the agencies that are represented here has been just outstanding. And we have together collaboratively looked at our joint resources to make sure that we could in fact provide the right services at the right time to our children, families, and our teaching staff. So council and council certainly has just been an unbelievable support of us, as well as our mayor. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Dr. Bazron, for being with us, and sorry you have to leave. George, I think you had about a minute or two.
Yeah, I had 1 minute left and I was going for one question. So I want to get that in if I can, Chairman.
Go for it.
Okay.
All right, thank you. I think, and I guess this question goes to OSSI and Dcps. I think there's been a lot of talk about investing in education wellness. And I think generally when we see when these investments are spoken of, and when we contact schools and ask whether they have money to use now on education wellness, they say no, and they haven't heard anything about it. So I would be great to hear whether this educator wellness investment will actually be money schools can spend on partnerships, for example. And then in addition to that, with educator wellness, wanting to hear, because schools haven't heard and they don't have money to spend, is also this idea of teacher retention which goes within wellness, right? I know DCPS won a grant for 30 million investment in teacher retention, and it looks like it's being largely spent on small per teacher retention bonuses, which I think research has really shown to be ineffective for retention. And I think that money could be better spent on initiatives that improve teacher morale or retention, like shared leadership work or more planning time, PD funding. And of course, much more effective use is also, kind of growing your own educator programs like we've has been proposed. So can you all speak to sort of how you plan on using this investment in teacher retention and sort of what your thought behind or research behind the strategies you're utilizing, and sort of when will schools see some of this educator wellness investment and be able to use it for partnerships? Thank you.
So I'm happy. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say very briefly that the statewide investments in educator wellness are include things like a self-service platform for on-demand wellness resources available to all educators. That's very different, obviously, than a school-based, but we believe in making those investments available for educators across the district to be able to access some of those individual sort of wellness and support resources one-on-one for their own self-care. But I'll defer to the Chancellor for the rest of your questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. We understand that teacher recruitment, retention, and wellness paramount right now. You mentioned the RISE grant, and I want to be clear, yes, there are recruitment and retention bonuses, and we've seen lots of value in that response to that, but it also includes rich professional development for our staff, which they have also asked for during this time. As I mentioned earlier, we have our DC Educator Wellness Center, and we are providing $5 million in training and supports to our teachers. Some of that will be centrally driven. Some of that will also be school-based. We also, it's important to note, are in still our gathering phase of additional feedback on how we will allocate our federal resources in the latest round of the ESSER recovery dollars. So it's important to note that the majority of the funds are in front of us in terms of how we would utilize those dollars. And of course, our educators and staff. I want to extend that across all of our staff members because our operational staff in schools, our custodial staff, our DSL, all have been vital to this school year, and we want to support them all. And we'll continue to understand how we can best allocate resources centrally and also at the school level.
Councilmember, may I add just something very brief?
Yes.
We have worked with Department of Behavioral Health also on this educator wellness across the city, and they are getting an investment to stand up a hotline for teachers, brief counseling support for teachers that want it, as well as group support and a community of practice that will be across sector and across public schools, and that will be advertised through every school. So that's in addition to what's been described already.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Allen and then Councilmember Henderson.
Thanks so much. I want to spend a few minutes trying to talk through our school time. And Deputy Mayor Kine, I know you talked about this in your opening comments as well. I guess one of the things I wanted to see if you could help outline how are we using or how are we increasing our OST capacity to accommodate demand? One of the things, when we held the hearing the other day, we heard from a lot of our OST providers, they're eager, they're excited. They've been doing virtual programming, but for a lot, but the ability to scale up and ramp up was kind of signaled as one of the challenges of being able to offer that type of programming in our out of school time. So in what ways are you able to help the ability to meet that demand and help them scale up?
Thanks, Councilmember, for that incredibly important question. And as we've talked about, and as I know you feel and understand deeply, the work of our out of school time partners could not be more critical and vital than it is right now. So we have our traditional out of school time grants that are going out this summer. We have contributed extra dollars into out of school time programming for this summer that will allow those that have already received rewards to expand the number of seats that they can offer. So we know that we'll be offering more seats this summer through out of school time programming. In addition to that, we are expanding the number of seats we can offer over the course of this school year through supplements from our federal dollars and our recovery planning into out of school time grant recipients. This programming is both the traditional programming that we're all used to seeing and is beloved by our communities, but it also incorporates some additional recovery efforts. So those OST providers that are able to support additional academic programming are asked to do so in a limited way as part of their overall program of work. So this is going to help ensure that we've got extra supports for summer and the school year. And one minor addition to this, we've also included in our recovery planning extra supports for OST to partner with our DYRS facilities to make sure that the young people who are in those facilities as well receive those kinds of recreational activities.
All right, thanks. All right, related then, how are we using federal dollars to help create capacity and increase affordability? Let me walk through what I mean by this. We have a lot of schools, and this is true, a lot of schools in Ward 6, which is why it's of mine for me, where the school itself has lost its Title I status. So they either were recently or just lost Title I, so they're no longer a Title I school. Yet they still have a significant at-risk student population. So when we think about the resources of OST and the programs, are there ways in which we can use federal dollars, and certainly I'd argue for Ward 6, but I'm sure we'll see the same case in a lot of other schools as well, that help our at-risk families be able to afford many of the programming that comes afterwards? Because what we see is, we'll lean on a PTA to go do their fundraising, and then we'll have families of means that can afford to pay. But then those quality programs become out of reach for families that are really struggling to make those ends meet. So in what ways are we able to use our federal dollars to help create the additional support so that at-risk families or the families on the edge are able to fully realize and fully participate the same programming that, myself or other families are able to afford and pay for?
Thanks, Councilmember. Again, a really important line of questioning for us and when we've considered. So we know that the increase in seat capacity can help that to a limited degree because you're providing subsidized or in some cases free programming. In addition to that, we're investing $1 million in what we're basically an out of school time scholarship fund. And so what this is going to do is it's going to enable those families that are at risk to access these scholarship monies that will pay for their out-of-school time programming that otherwise would be out of reach for them. So I believe that program is going to address exactly the question that you're raising, and we're excited to provide that to families.
Yeah, and okay, that sounds like that could be really encouraging. How does someone access that? So, and what I mean by this is the burden on the family to be able to apply for that scholarship and then be able to draw down those funds to pay for it, or do we look at how many at-risk families we have at I'm using a non-Title I school as an example, and then the school itself, the PTA, the OST provider is able to then access those dollars to then help provide that direct cost assistance? How do we?
Yeah, I understand that question. Very important. The way that we are designing this program is that it is an application process by the family, so that they are indicating that there's an out-of-school time program that they're interested in attending, and then they apply for access to this funding, and then they'll receive it to pay for their out-of-school time programming.
Okay. Is there, I'll just be honest, I'm a little concerned about how we make sure our at-risk families would be able to apply, or as schools are setting up their OST programming. I mean, I'll just use my school as an example. I know that when the after-school programming board goes up, it is a mad dash as families are trying to figure out which works with their schedule, what matches the interest of the kids, and they are signing up as fast as they possibly can. Good luck if you get 2 or 3 kids at the same school and you're trying to do that, right? So if I'm creating a system where I need an at-risk family to be able to apply for the costs of that, I'm a little concerned about how would they be able to, in that marketplace of aftercare, be able to get into those slots if they haven't actually if they don't know that they've got the cost, because the cost is going to be a barrier. Are there ways in which we could think, and certainly we could follow up after the hearing on this too, but are there ways that we could think about how to creatively allow those funds to get more on the front end, or even be able to go directly through the school? Maybe it's the PTA, PTO, maybe it's directly with that OST provider, so that we reduce that barrier and help them get in. Because I know this would fall into those unintended consequences, but would we accidentally create something where they just can't get into that OST? And even if we have a scholarship or assistance after the fact, all the slots got filled up. Does that make sense what I'm describing, kind of the way it works sometimes on the ground?
Councilmember, I really do hear you, and we've considered the various ways and methods we could provide this kind of support, which we believe is critical. And we'll certainly be very happy with the out-of-school time office and my office to follow up with you after this to continue the discussion. We did believe, looking at all the different variables and factors, that this was the most straightforward way to ensure families would have access to it. So we're happy to continue that conversation.
Okay.
I'll point out, in addition to the investment specifically in this program, that the deputy mayor suggests that it is an allowable expense under federal recovery funds through LEAs and schools, that that after school programming aligned with supporting these things be funded. And so this may be a conversation where there is discretionary funding at a school or LEA level that school or LEA may identify on its own. Mm-hmm. Similarly, the way it may have made those decisions with Title I funding. So there may be multiple ways to address this in different paths.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and this sounds like something we can certainly follow up on and work with you. I just want to say, as I think about the context of recovery, we've got a lot of families that have lost jobs, lost loved ones, that they're hurting, and we got to figure out how many barriers can we just remove. How many barriers can we just take off the table and take out of play? And it seems like, for me, wouldn't it make sense to say to that at-risk family, and I'm making up the dollar figure here just as an example, but you got $100 to spend. You don't have to apply for it. You just got $100 to spend on out-of-school time on that aftercare program. Don't let this become the barrier. You've got $100 to spend, so that they just know what they've got in their hand, which allows them to eliminate that barrier and just go straight into what their kids need. And if we're thinking about what the recovery is for the kids that have experienced so much trauma, families have experienced so much trauma, I just think it's incumbent on us to try to remove every barrier we possibly can. And so I don't mean to say that I'm not, that I don't think the $1 million is important. I think it certainly is, Deputy Mayor. I'm really glad to hear that you're really trying to think about how to create some intentionality around that type of direct assistance. I just want to think about, since we've got a little bit of time, but we don't have a lot, how do we remove as many barriers as possible so that those funds can be accessed as quickly and easily as possible? Because I just know that that board on the wall at school gets filled up really fast. And if I've got to go fill out a form and get signed up and apply for something, I'm going to miss it. And my kid's not going to get what they need. Dr. Fairby, you want to jump in real fast?
Councilman Allen, may I add some DCPS context on is an important issue. So one, DCPS, with all of our partners, work to ensure that our partners bring on board to DCPS are committed to ensuring families have equitable access regardless of socioeconomic need. But you make a good point about the Title I status and federal dollars. So what we have been able to do with our federal recovery dollars is to allocate those dollars to schools in proportion to the students that are designated as at risk. And so if you have more at-risk students, you do receive more at-risk dollars. For example, as a part of our acceleration funds to schools, we've allocated $26 million to schools based on their at-risk population. And we've added an additional $5 million for social emotional development. What schools can do is they can then schedule activities before school, after school, on Saturdays with those funds and target students that may have needs at that particular school. With the school having the best knowledge of what families may need those resources, and the families would not have to ask for those resources, opportunities, the schools would then extend an offer and an option for families to participate. And we will continue these types of exercises and offerings, not over the summer, but also into next school year as well.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I know my time is up. I think the focus on those schools that have lost their Title I status, but still have significant at-risk kids, I think that's where I see a potential really strong equity gap that I'd love to work with you on. But I heard you commit to working with us on this. So thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Superintendent and Chancellor.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Councilmember Henderson and then Councilmember Silverman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, double dipping here. Chancellor Fairby, and I guess this is even a question for the superintendent or even for the deputy mayor. What happens if a parent wants to know whether or not their child's teacher has been vaccinated?
So at DCPS, there's no current process in which we would know the specifics on each employee's vaccination status, nor could we share that with their family.
Okay. I'm asking this question because I anticipate that this is going to be a question that parents are going to ask, especially for younger kids where, masks. I got a 2-year-old. She hates a mask. And they like to love in pre-K. We do hugs and stuff like that. But I think a family would feel comfortable in terms of in-person instruction if they knew that the teacher was vaccinated or not. And I understand that because the vaccine is currently still under emergency use authorization, you all can't require it. But what are the efforts that we're taking to try to get as many people as possible? Because I could foresee a situation where you have one school who's promoting enrollment by saying we have 100% of our teachers vaccinated, and another school can't answer that question.
Yeah, so I think, what's important though, as you described, is our youngest learners are actually the most compliant and done a phenomenal job with mask wearing. And I would encourage you, a book that's excellent is Maya's Mask. It is designed for younger learners and it's a great way to describe the importance of masks. I feel very confident in our outreach to employees and encouraging them to get vaccinated. But the logistics of this is that we have not only employees we know have been vaccinated through our efforts, which is close to 3,000, which is a good portion of our workforce. We have so many others who have been vaccinated in other jurisdictions or through other vaccination efforts. So we're very confident that the majority of our employees have been vaccinated. I think where the challenge that you're describing is providing specific information on an employee to a family on employees' vaccination status is a little bit more challenging. But we're continuing to work with DC Health on the most transparent ways we can share vaccination information without violating employees' confidentiality.
Okay. I mean, I think as you talk to DC Health about that, I think the other thing you should probably talk to them about is their rules about quarantine for travel, especially for the youngest folks, but also for the adults in your building, right? If I, let's say, school starts on August 30th, if a family travels for Labor Day weekend out of the District of Columbia, if a teacher who has not been vaccinated travels out of the District of Columbia for Labor Day weekend, they will have to quarantine for 7 days. And I'm just curious, are y'all being part of these conversations in terms of the logistics around how that impacts school operations?
Yeah, so we partner with the Office of State Superintendent and also DC Health around all of our health and safety protocols. They have evolved as we've learned more about the science of COVID-19, and they've been modified. So for example, we were at a 14-day quarantine. Now we are at a 10-day quarantine, and I anticipate that'll change again. We've had states that were identified as of high concern, and we don't have that now as we've had in the past. So that'll continue involving. We'll continue to collaborate to ensure that we have the strongest mitigating strategies in place. But I do want to just reiterate the point around our layered approach, and that there isn't one strategy that we rely on, but we rely on a multitude of strategies in terms of our COVID response. And we'll continue to encourage as many residents and families to be vaccinated, as we see that as our strong strategy for mitigating community spread.
Okay, thank you so much. Those are all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. Councilmember Silverman.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and I'm sorry that I could only join the hearing at this time. Good afternoon, Madam Superintendent, Mr. Deputy Mayor, Mr. Chancellor. Good to see you all. In meetings that I've had with several school communities, and these are school communities both east of the river and west of the park and in between, as well as with teachers and other workers in DCPS who are part of collective bargaining units, there is one overarching theme. They haven't had any input into reopening plans, and they have no idea what is going to happen. I have to tell, I guess maybe this is specifically to you, Mr. Chancellor. It is an overarching theme. We heard it, Mr. Chairman, at the hearing with Ward 7 and 8 parents on, I think that was Wednesday night. So Mr. Chancellor, let me divide this into, I guess, two groups. First, I know I worked with you back in, it seems like years ago, but I think it was like October and November, about working with the unions, the collective bargaining units in DCPS. The feedback I get is that the meetings are still happening, so that's good progress. But what I hear is it's a one-way street, that it's just you and DCPS telling the unions information, and there's no conversation, there's no opportunity for feedback, there's no dialogue. So I guess I would like your comment on that, Mr. Chancellor, if you think that's unfair, and how can we get more input? I mean, I just had a conversation yesterday, and this is exactly what was said. We don't have any chance to give input into what reopening will look like. And frankly, we don't know. And I will echo what Councilmember Henderson said, you know, a lot of people want to know about mandatory vaccinations. So.
Thank you for raising this question up. It's an important one. You know, I would disagree, and I'll go back to your question specifically about the labor leaders. We meet bi-weekly. Actually had a meeting this Wednesday, and the structure of that meeting is the first half hour, DCPS administration is presenting topics as we think about planning for the future and for next school year. And as issues have been raised this school year. And then we dedicate the second half of that meeting for our labor leaders to raise any concerns that they have. So they can bring topics to the table for us to discuss. But this question reminds me of our conversation on Wednesday. So we had the pleasure of meeting Wednesday. And a part of this presentation from DCPS was what should be our health and safety protocols for next year. And I proceeded to present some of our thinking around next school year and where we are and solicited feedback. And we got feedback. We got great feedback. Richard Jackson from the CSO provided great feedback around what should be happening in terms of we think about entry. Who's going to be responsible next year for health screenings? Who's going to be responsible next year for isolation rooms? Will we have the same level of support from our contracted health professionals? It was a great discussion. And it actually leaned into a conversation between our representative from our school security and our school leaders. And so I think that conversation represents the spirit of the way that we've been engaging over this year. And this idea that there's not an opportunity to provide input just isn't true. And we'll definitely follow up with the labor leaders to ensure that if they have any questions or they feel like the meetings aren't productive, to solicit feedback on how we might restructure the meeting time.
Well, I certainly take your word, Chancellor Farabee. So let me ask you this. Can you give me like 3 examples of where input from labor leaders has changed what initially DCPS administration had proposed? Just give me a few examples so that I can understand how their input has been used.
Yes, certainly. Happy to do that. So what comes to mind first is our school security staff early on in the process this school year raised the fact that they would like to be more engaged in our health and safety protocols and have suggested that they could be trained on some of our health procedures and be additional support staff to our schools. So that is something that we're incorporating into our planning for next school year. I think about the time we got feedback from the Washington Teacher Union. They brought to our attention that there's a need to have face shields for certain educators to have closer contact with students and staff throughout the school year. And as a result, we incorporated the distribution and the procurement of face shields into our work. One other point of feedback, and it's great that we have people like Robert Austin. President Austin is an employee at Coolidge. He's also a labor leader. And he's asked the important questions around how can our health clinics be better engaged with vaccinations and ensuring that students have clear immunization records. And he called out the fact that that the health suite and clinic at Coolidge had not been utilized in the way that he thought it could. And so we immediately started conversation with the partner there, the Mary Center, who's supporting it. And we are building out additional opportunities for the community to leverage that opportunity in the building. And then finally, our school nurses. So we have the school nurses at the table, and they brought to our attention the need to have plexiglass protection in the nurses suite for our nurses. And so we incorporated that into our health and safety protocols. So I don't want to take too much time. I could give you plenty other examples.
Well, no, this is good. I mean, it's helpful for me to hear your side of it, Mr. Chancellor, because, I have heard largely it's been a one-way street. So I have 2 more questions. So I'm hoping so I've heard this, so I want to make sure I get to my second question, but let me just follow the thread here. I've also heard from parents, they have no idea what reopening is going to look like. So help me understand why parents feel that way. They don't know what to expect.
Yeah, so for DCPS, we are very much so committed, as we've said all throughout this spring and summer as we prepare for next school year. Parents should expect and plan for a full reopening. They should expect what they experienced prior to the health emergency. What we are doubling down on in our communication efforts is ensuring that families understand our health and safety protocols. We've heard from our community members in our listening sessions. We want to be able to see the work that you've done. We want to understand what logistics will look like as you think about bringing all of our students back on campus. And to be responsive to that, we are hosting tours of our facilities. And you may have heard the example I gave earlier with LaSalle Bacchus and the way that they've already invited families in to see, and much of that work will continue over the summer.
Okay, if there's another round, I'll pursue this, but I do want to ask maybe in honor of Liz Davis about impact. So one of the last conversation I had with Liz Davis was about a study I believe American University was doing on impact. And I think they've completed this research. DCPS apparently has the data and the study, but the WTU had requested, I think, both the complete research analysis as well as some granular data. So help me understand here, Mr. Chancellor, what is going on? Can the WTU get access to the, why can't they have their request fulfilled, and can the council get that information as well?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. We're very much so committed to continue to reevaluate impact and how it can be leveraged to continue progress in DCPS. We're proud that American University has been willing to do the research for us. And they've also asked that they have a timeline in which they can be thorough in that research. So we have collaborated with them, and they provided to us the preliminary findings from that research. And we've shared that with the WTU. We actually hosted a session with the Washington Teacher Union to share those preliminary findings. To date, that is all we have, and what we've shared is what we have. Now, there will be more data coming, and we provided that timeline to the Washington Teacher Union of when we will receive additional data points as part of the research. And as we receive it, we'll be happy to share it. We believe that they have been and will continue to be great partners in this evaluation, and also will continue to give us insight of how we can reimagine this tool for our teachers.
I'm out of time, but just Mr. Chancellor, have you shared this preliminary data with the Committee of the Whole?
I have not received a request from the Committee of the Whole for this data, but we're happy to share that information.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to request it. Thank you for the answers, Mr. Chancellor.
Chancellor, yes, I think you'll have to consider that the Committee of the Whole's requested it. Councilmember Pinto.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So Chancellor Farabee, I'm really appreciative of your and the mayor's efforts to make sure that staffing levels will not be cut, but I want to better understand how we're going to protect our school librarians. Why is it that they are designated as level 2 staff members? And do you know how many schools will have a full-time librarian next year?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember, for that question. Again, as I mentioned earlier, know firsthand the value out of our librarians, and we're pleased to have their support, many of which have been with DCPS for a very long time. The level 2 status of our school librarians is something that has been in existence for multiple years as a part of the comprehensive staffing model. So this isn't a new feature. However, we have seen most recently some shifts in how those positions are utilized, and we'll continue to monitor that. This is not the only position that is designated as level 2. There's many others that are flexible as well, and we also monitor those positions. We are going to continue not only to monitor, but I'm meeting with our school librarians next month in June, so to hear from them directly. And as we have school plans develop each year, we're asking our instructional superintendents to monitor the implementation of staff to ensure that there's equitable access for library services across the district.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I know it's a concern to all of us on this meeting to not put our school principals in a position that they have to make those really hard choices around librarians, which are extremely important to our students and families.
And interesting, we have not heard from our principals that there's a desire to change that status, but that is something that we'll continue to ask them about, in addition to librarians, other positions that are designated level 2.
Okay, well, I will just say it is something that our office has heard about from many schools. And so I think adds to the importance of adding opportunities for people to give feedback, particularly anonymous feedback, as we try to move forward. But I would appreciate if, as you have those conversations, if we can have an understanding of how many schools will not have a librarian next year.
Yes, we'll provide numbers, and we have additional librarians in schools. We actually, year over year, have more librarians for next school year than we had this current school year.
Okay, thank you so much. So I want to learn a little bit more about literacy training and how we are empowering our teachers to address literacy issues in our schools. Is there an increased focus on that this year?
Yes, definitely. In DCPS, what we saw this school year is many of our, especially in our early grade students, came into the school year not at the same level that we typically see. And so as a result, we have robust training available to our teachers, one through our DC reading clinic. This reading clinic provides a clinical approach to the development process for our teachers. And we've also leaned into reading and writing across the content area. So incorporating some of our science and social studies standards and utilizing the power of literacy to not only deepen students' understanding of those topics, but also to enhance their reading and writing skills. We've also established a number of webinars. So there's a series of webinars that teachers can access on demand that provides additional context for the reading across the content and writing across the content area that I've just described. And we've added 3 coaches to support early literacy science of reading. And they're very much so focused on schools in Ward 7 and 8.
And if I can add from the OSSI side as well, we're making significant investments for resources for LEAs across the board on analyzing the curricula that they do use to ensure that it's aligned with the top current science and science of reading, as well as we are investing some of our federal dollars aligned with our current statewide literacy grant and statewide literacy plan to support schools who want to upgrade and improve their literacy curricula, as well as training teachers in the science of reading and investing in our own professional development efforts to improve and to provide individual teachers further technical assistance and professional development.
Well, thank you so much for the added focus. I appreciate that. And how many teachers has that program trained so far that Chancellor Farabee was talking about?
Are you asking about the reading clinic? Or
yeah, I think
what
one of the last pieces you mentioned was online training.
We've had 110 teachers that have gone through the reading clinic.
Okay. Well, thank you. All right. So how are we keeping track of students supervised after school care and other programming that is going on so we can best determine where the gaps are?
Councilmember, thanks for the question. You're asking if we have a comprehensive view of where we have after school programming currently? in
Right,
place.
because it's of course such a myriad of opportunities and programs, education, supervision. How are we increasing our coordination and collaboration so that we have an accurate sense of which students are supervised after school and where the holes still are?
Well, I can certainly begin the answer to this question, because through our out of school time office, we have something called a program finder, which is our way of understanding what providers are operating where in the city. And that allows us to understand, certainly on a ward by ward, and in some instances neighborhood by neighborhood basis, where we actually do have out of school time offerings that are funded by our out of school time office. Each LEA, and the Chancellor can speak to this for DCPS, will also have a view of where they've got after school activities through their own central administration. So that's a supplement to what I just described.
Yeah, DCPS has a specific out of school time office that coordinates directly with our providers. We've already started the work of coordination for next school year, and many of those partners are supporting our summer programming. And to give you a flavor of the implementation, we have 55 of our 118 schools that are utilizing out of school time partners to support students and families for next school year.
Well, that's wonderful, and hope to see that continue to be expanded and coordinated.
And I think one other interesting fact about our after school partnership is that many of those partners are in our elementary schools, where we see the most demand for after school support for families to have a full day. I know that was a challenge that we heard from families this school year, is wanted to send my child back to school, but we didn't have a before and after school care, so that barrier limited. So those will be opportunities that will be available to families next school year.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much for everything you're doing. Sorry that after 15 months of speaking for 15 hours a day, my voice finally gave out. So thank you for everything, and thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Pinto, and I didn't notice that your voice had given out, so there's still some life there. I have a few more questions and then we will be done. We're past the 12 o'clock hour, which is when I hope this would end. My question is focused on IT, and I think this will be mostly to the Deputy Mayor because my question concerns what we're doing with regard to IT and access and bandwidth and all that in both sectors, both charter and DCPS. Let me see, Comcast has raised its Wi-Fi speeds to 50 megabytes per second, which still may not be enough if a household has multiple students using multiple devices simultaneously. Has the district explored paying for faster Wi-Fi for its students?
Thanks, Chairman, for raising this topic, which I know we touched on a little bit earlier. We have been providing broadband in a few different ways. As you know, the Internet for All program, which allows families access to the Internet Essentials, has actually seen that increase in capacity to 50 megabits, and we're hopeful that in many instances that will solve some of the challenges some families have been experiencing. You'll be aware of the FCC Emergency Broadband Benefit Program, which actually also provides additional capacity, higher speeds than that 50 megabytes, which families will be eligible for, and we're helping to promote that and push that out to families as well. And then, as the Chancellor mentioned, through some of our hotspot provision and other access points that the LEAs themselves have been providing, we do exceed that. So those are the ways in which we are trying to promote better broadband access for families.
So the district is subsidizing Comcast Internet Essentials for some families. Are we doing anything with RCN?
Yes, the Internet for All program, which the district is subsidizing, is both RCN and Comcast. Those are the two providers that are involved in that program.
Okay, and my understanding is that Internet Essentials, which is Comcast, is only 50 megabytes, and that's recent. which is fine because we're really concerned about this coming year. Not so good for the year we're ending, but RCN is still at 25 megabytes per second. Have you had conversations with RCN?
I know that we had earlier on in the pandemic, had conversations with RCN about increasing bandwidth capacity. They were getting that request, as Comcast was, from multiple jurisdictions. I actually don't know the latest conversations between Octo and RCN, but I'll be happy to find out about that and provide that information to your office.
Okay, so that's not your office, that's Octo.
We've been partnering very closely with Octo, who is leading the relationships with RCN and Comcast on Internet for All.
Okay, and then you said there's an FCC Federal Communications Commission initiative?
Yeah, there's a new, as part of the recovery work, and I'm just looking down to make sure I get the name right. It's the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program that will provide higher internet speeds. And again, this will provide broadband for low-income households that apply for it.
Do you know how soon?
I don't have the exact timing on that, but it is intended to be part of the recovery. So I expect in the next few months.
Well, I'm reminded, this is going to sound like I'm being snarky and I don't mean to be, but I'm reminded of Stay DC, which we have a lot of hope around, but Stay DC has been a little bumpy, and it would be nice to get this worked out. Are there any special efforts east of the river and in other low-income communities? Access to the internet as well as bandwidth.
So the Internet Access Program that we have been helping to support, that the LEAs have been running, that the Chancellor spoke to, and that also this Internet for All program is helping to drive, has really been focused on low-income residents. So regardless of geography, we, in the first instance, were working with families that were recipients of TANF and SNAP benefits. That's now been expanded to include families that are eligible for free and reduced lunch, so our community eligibility program schools. Any children that attend those schools now have access. And so it is differentiated based on what we perceive to be need, based on income.
And how do we know that families are accessing this? It's one thing to make a program available. It's another thing to pursue strategies that increase uptake or take up.
In the case of the Internet for All program, we know that families that have signed up, because we're doing this in partnership with the providers, so 5,500 households have accessed the internet through RCN and Comcast through our Internet for All program to date. And we continue to drive enrollment through LEAs and other means.
I was just going to ask, so are the LEAs doing anything to push this?
They're doing a lot. We have had Octo join us for many conversations with our LEA leaders. We have delivered communications to the LEA leaders and school leaders for them to provide to their families. They have really been at the center of our work to communicate with families.
This 5,500 strikes me as a percentage, maybe 25% of the family households we need to reach. Chancellor Farabee?
Yeah, I just want to add some DCPS flavor. So we are working with Octo in our school point of contacts to push out and promote all of the offerings that are available to families. So I know that was one of your questions. I also think it's important to note that we are maintaining our current data plans and hotspots for students throughout the summer. So if you have a DCPS device, many of which are LTE enabled, you can connect directly to the internet through that device, and those plans will be in operation throughout the summer if a student is taking courses over the summer or if the student needs the device for summer youth employment. And those plans will be available to students in the fall as needed.
Well, I'm kind of thinking of the vaccine hesitancy issue, and it's one thing to make IT available. It's another thing to figure out strategies to get more families to actually access it, just like with the vaccine.
Yeah, if you have a device, there's nothing you need to do. If you have a device or a hotspot, it will continue to function throughout the summer.
Well, I understand, but I'm speaking of the number of households that may not be taking advantage either of getting the devices or getting the additional bandwidth.
Understood.
Chairman, just on that one quick point, sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to share that we have, since the beginning of the pandemic, we've provided internet access to more than 63,000 students through our hotspots and internet for all. So I understand that there is still need. We continue to find ways to address it, but we have certainly provided internet access to many, many households and many families.
Now, what I've learned is that what I thought a couple hearings ago about going from, I think, 15 megabytes per second to 25 was pretty good, is that 50 is better, and even 50 can be problematic if there's more than one kid in a household accessing the internet, as in attending classes at the same time. But I've also learned that the hotspots are not as good as LTE-enabled devices. So what are we doing to convert, if you will, from hotspots to LTE, so everybody's LTE?
So for DCPS, as we procure additional devices, all of those devices will be LTE enabled for this upcoming school year. So we made the transition last year with our new devices being LTE enabled, and that will be our procurement expectation going forward. So all the devices that students have going forward will be LTE enabled, and they'll have access to the internet as needed.
What about the charters? My understanding is that charters got a lot of hotspots. What conversations, I guess this would be to the deputy mayor, I'm not sure the chancellor's position to answer this. What conversations have you had with charters about having students enroll in the district's Octo internet program?
Thanks, Chairman. We have had many conversations with charter LEA leaders on this Internet for All program. In fact, like DCPS, charter schools have really been at the center of promoting digital access and surmounting the digital divide. So many of the families that I described are coming from the charter sector. Also, as you know, charter schools initially made big purchases, bulk purchases of internet-enabled devices and hotspots that they distributed to families in exactly the same way that DCPS has. And in my discussions more recently, and over the course of this year, we've also been talking with charter leaders, as with DCPS, about the bandwidth point that you're making to ensure that as we purchase new devices, as they make those investments, as they roll them out to families, that we're ensuring families are getting the internet access that they need to be successful. So I would say they're in exactly the same position as DCPS is on this.
Have you looked at strategies, and I have to say I don't fully understand this one, Wi-Fi buses or trailers stationed near schools that people could use, like mobile internet Wi-Fi cafes?
We looked at that initially, Chairman. As you'll recall, last March, April, as we were all working around the clock to try to ensure that families had access to virtual learning, one of the strategies that we heard about from other jurisdictions was this idea of Wi-Fi enabled buses. We actually quite quickly moved away from it because of the fact that the proximity required to the buses really limited the utility of those out in communities, meaning it'd be very hard for you to figure out exactly where you need to locate the buses. And then secondly, what we learned is that it turned out they were contributing to the spread of the virus at that time because people would sort of gather around the buses and sit around them. And so that's why we moved away from that as an idea early on.
Okay, that's not the answer I was expecting, but interesting. I'm going to shift a little bit. This is a little bit more focused to DCPS. As you know, Chancellor, there is an organization of parents, Digital Equity in DC Education. They testified the other day at the special committee's hearing. And some of what they asked, I think it's worth my asking you. How will you manage the return of student devices and hotspots?
Thank you, Chairman, for that question. And I've had the pleasure of meeting with that group, with you as well, and we appreciate their advocacy. We are allowing students to keep their devices over the summer unless they are graduating or transferring out of DCPS. We've given schools the guidance and the protocols to implement those standards. And we think it's important that students have access to the technology they have to continue learning over the summer. As a part of this comprehensive guidance, we are providing targeted support. So to your point about some families may not proactively reach out to us, we will reach out to the families to ensure that they understand what to expect and to help with planning. And then if there's a student that needs a device, we can provide that to them, and we're prepared to provide additional devices to get to our 1-to-1 ratio and 3-to-1 ratio in K through 2. If a student is graduating, they can drop off their device, but as a part of DCPS Persist, we're happy to help students with procuring a laptop if they need one for their college experience.
And who's the we when you say we're reaching out? We're reaching out to see if they have needs, or reaching out to let them know what they can.
Right, that happens directly through the schools. So that would be our school-based staff. We have also specific technology staff that's a part of our cluster support model that supports schools directly as well. And what's fascinating, or add to this mix, is we are also adding to our outdoor learning options is schools' ability to add a Wi-Fi feature for outdoor learning. So the internet access the signals may be stronger in the building. And if they wanted to utilize technology outside, they would have access to a boost that would give students the ability to learn outside and utilize their technology with the same access levels and speed.
So what I'm taking from this is that these are policies that DCPS has put in place, and then it's up to the schools to implement it. So it would be up to, I'm trying to think, Sousa Middle School, Elliott Hine, the principal or some officials from those schools would be the ones who notify their community.
Yes, but we also have dedicated staff that support the schools directly. So the schools are not taking on that work in entirety by themselves, but we wanted to ensure that there was very clear guidance to schools of what should be happening to devices over the summer and how we will distribute devices to students for the upcoming school year.
Now the digital.
And before you go on, I want to be clear that we also track and monitor that. So we have a software solution called TipWeb, which is what we use to monitor our device inventory. And also baked into our technology plan is loss. So if there's devices that are lost or damaged, we can easily replace those and provide students with the technology they need for learning.
The digital equity in DC education also asked, the timeline and milestones for ensuring that student and teacher devices, tech support, and school home internet infrastructure will be ready on day one of next school year. Do you have that timeline and milestones at this point?
Yeah, so we are extremely confident in our planning that we will have devices for students and staff at the start of the school year. And we're also providing training as well, particularly for our students, digital citizenry, and then also for staff, how to safely use devices and go from low tech to high tech usage and integration. We have milestones for procurement for spring and summer. We have been working on this since early spring. We have great confidence that devices will be ready, and we are leveraging some of our federal dollars to support this purpose.
My understanding is that this year's DCPS enrollment form package included a question or questions on access to the internet and devices.
That is correct. So as a part,
I'm sorry, go on.
So I just wanted to know for the public that we have established a process in which families can enroll or re-enroll via technology and submit all their documents electronically. As a part of that questionnaire is information around the students' access to technology. and we store that information in our student information database that allows us to plan and also be responsive if a student should indicate they don't have a device or if they're using their personal device. So we have some type of scan of what technology is available or what may be needed.
So then, if I were to ask, and at the moment I'm not going to, you could provide data broken down by school? With regard
Yes, we can provide our best estimate of where each school is currently, but that would only be once the enrollment process is complete. So we're still in the enrollment process right now. Families have until June 1st to re-enroll, and we anticipate there'll still be some enrollment to happen over the summer. But once the enrollment process is complete, we should have a strong estimate of what the technology needs are for each school.
And when you say for each school, that really means for the families at each school.
That's correct. So for example, we would have a view into Cardozo. At Cardozo, how many students have indicated that they have their own device, how many students are using a DCPS device, and then we can also drill down to the individual student level as well.
Well, now is DCPS waiting until after the official count in October or after opening day to look at this data, or are you looking at it now, beginning?
We're looking at it now. So it's a part of our technology readiness indicators and our annual school opening stat process. So we look at various data points on a weekly basis, and it's a central services team to prepare for readiness for day one. So we look at technology, we look at curriculum, we look at health and safety, and the part of that process includes technology readiness. I was just sharing that we would not have a complete full picture until the enrollment process is complete, because we know families are still in the midst of that enrollment process.
Sure, but the goal here, and you've answered this, is that schools ought to be able to get an idea as early as possible what the needs or the deficits are, if you will, in terms of access to technology. The Digital Equity Coalition has been quite articulate before the council with regard to the needs for improvement in digital access. And so I'm a little frustrated that they're very frustrated that they ask for information and they either don't get answers or they're told to resort to FOIA. Is that really necessary?
I'm not sure what they've requested that we haven't been responsive to. I know that our team has met regularly with this group and we've appreciated the opportunity to hear from them. And we have taken a lot of their feedback into consideration in our planning. But I'm not aware of any information that may be requested that we haven't shared. Of course, there's still some information on our planning side that is deliberative that may not be information that we're able to share at that time. However, I can't think of anything that has been withheld at this point.
Well, this was their testimony on Wednesday. Without information provided in a timely and open manner, it is hard to assess the extent of tech challenges and the effectiveness of government actions to address digital equity. As a parent volunteer group, more than half our time and energy is spent trying to figure out how to get information from DC government. We meet with and send questions to the government agencies involved. Often it takes weeks to months to get a response, or we get a vague response that is not helpful. Occasionally, we resort to using FOIA to request information, but that process takes weeks and you must request a government record document, which means knowing what document or record contains the information you seek. A subset of questions we've asked over a month ago and did not get a response. Teacher devices. Did you finish testing sample devices with teachers? Have you chosen a model and can you share how many teachers will receive devices? School Wi-Fi. Please share the list of schools that will receive internet infrastructure upgrades this year. Could you also know which 5 schools will be upgraded to 5 gigs and confirm the project completion date? Could you also provide the list of schools that were upgraded last year? DCPS Octo MOU, has the MOU been finalized? And there's a little bit more.
Yeah. So I get the essence of the question. Again, I think some of that may be what's deliberative. So for example, my understanding, they wanted to know the teacher device that was selected before the procurement process was completed. That's just not something that we're going to do. We're not in a position to share that type of information. However, I think the most important thing to take away from this conversation, a line of questioning, is that we should go back to the group, and we're happy to do that. And we're happy to circle back and get an understanding of what they would like to hear from us and what they see as the communication gaps. But I want to be clear that when we're in planning phases and there's questions, we're not always able to share details until those details are ironed out. In many cases, they're deliberative. And I think the administration has the right to have those types of deliberative conversation before that information goes to the group or is shared publicly.
Well, I think that's fair, but just for the record, the question was, have you chosen the model? And can you share how many teachers will receive devices? There was one other question that they had, and that was, and I don't know if this is for you, well, it's focused on DCPS, so maybe it is for you. DCPS still lacks a comprehensive multi-year tech plan.
Yeah, we were actually in a meeting together where we heard that, and it just from my view is not accurate. We have our Empowered Learnings Initiative, which is our tech plan. It addresses devices, it addresses infrastructure, it addresses internet access, and addresses devices for our educators. So I just don't know why that there's this sense that we don't have a plan. And in fact, what's great about it, and through the support from the mayor, Mayor Bowser's leadership and the council, we have the dollars and the resources to execute on the Empowered Learners Initiative that we launched 3 years ago. And we're excited that this coming school year that we will fulfill the promise of every student having a device in 3 through 12 and a 1-to-3 ratio in grades K through 2.
So your answer was you do have a tech plan.
Yeah, it is our Empowered Learners Initiative. That is our technology plan, and we communicate that. It's a 3-year plan.
Would you follow up this hearing by sending us a copy?
Sure, we're absolutely happy to do that. And it's also important to know that we accelerated the implementation of the plan due to the health emergency and the need for students to have rich technology and robust access to the internet. But we're happy to share that plan.
Chairman, may I jump in briefly?
Yes, please.
I just wanted to offer an observation that I think I'm very appreciative of this rich line of questioning on technology and internet access, and certainly all the contingency planning we're doing that is so important. I did want to observe that one thing we're extremely excited about in recovery is that kids are all coming back to school. So there will be less of a need for what we're describing. It's important that we have it in place and we honor the need for this. It's one of our points of enthusiasm about what we're learning from this period of time, that we'll be able to accelerate all this work, as the Chancellor's saying. And I did want to observe, at the risk that we might end shortly, this hearing on recovery, that we are really excited that kids will be back in school and have less of a need for this kind of digital access on a daily basis.
I think that's a fair point. I'm glad you made it. But I think we've learned that there's some value to the pandemic. Has its pluses and minuses, more minuses. But one of the things we've learned is that there's more we can be doing in the virtual space. We sort of knew before the pandemic that we wanted more internet access because that enables education. So you're right. And I shouldn't be sounding like, well, we're going to continue with all virtual learning in the fall when it's exactly the opposite. But then that still makes a digital plan important. It turns out I was trying to tell my staff that I have no more questions, and they proceeded to tell me that I do. So I think this one's for Asi. And it's actually going to be a couple of questions. The You indicated in your testimony that you'll be providing professional development and training on the science of reading. How will this training and professional development be funded? Using ESSER dollars? Are you referring to the training in PD professional development that is required in the dyslexia bill? If not, how will this training in PD differ from what's required under the dyslexia bill? And why not just fund the training in PD portions of the dyslexia bill?
Thanks so much for that. And I have to say that I don't have the specific requirements of the bill in front of me. So I'd be happy to follow up on the specifics of the bill and the technicalities of the training required there. However, I do think that the training that we are planning is aligned to the science of reading and will be funded by our federal funds for ESSER, as well as combined with our traditional local funding and the funding from our literacy plan, which was a separate grant that was provided by the U.S. Department of Education to improve literacy for the district. So we are really excited in being able to provide that training and foundational concepts of literacy, and in ensuring all of our educators have access, not just early elementary, but actually across the age spectrum of teachers, to effective literacy support and training.
How long will this take?
How long will what take?
This work that you just talked about with regard to literacy. Is it going to be all of FY22? Is it starting now and it'll be done by the beginning of the school year? Will it be done under a year?
Yeah, our investments in training for foundational literacy will begin this school year, potentially over the summer. I have to check specifically on some of the timing of the training, and continue over a number of years. We would hope to extend that training opportunity for several years into the future, because it's important both for new and incoming teachers and for teachers to improve and touch up their skills as they continue their careers. So it's not a single program that will be completed this fall. It's an investment in the training of teachers that we'd like to sustain long term.
You'd like to, I didn't hear that. Sustain. But it does have a fairly quick start.
I certainly hope so. I'll have to get back to you on the specifics of the timing of some of those trainings.
Well, I was struck in your statement when you said we will conduct a citywide audit of current literacy curricula.
Mm-hmm.
I would have thought that you know what curricula schools are using. When I say schools, maybe I mean LEAs.
Yeah, we have some idea, but those things are up to the choice of the LEA, and those things change over time. And every LEA chooses different curricula at different grade levels that are aligned to their school programming. And so as part of our continuous education plan and related ESSA planning, we're asking LEAs to let us know the types of curricula they're using so that we can match our technical assistance and professional development and directly connect folks to the tools that we've already invested in to evaluate where the strengths and weaknesses are, so that schools can consider how they are addressing their curricula and materials in the context of other literacy work. Our statewide literacy planning and grant includes a set of sub-grants for LEAs to create their own literacy plan with related funding for services and supports. And so we're talking about investing really systemically at the state level to leverage our work in literacy forward to help sustain student growth for years in the future.
So how soon will the audit be done?
So again, this is like a landscape audit. It's not like a forensic audit. That
Sure.
should be, I will have to get back to you. I believe sometime this fall.
All right, I would have thought sooner based on what you were saying, because if you want to start the PD soon, then, and you're informing it by what curricula the LEAs are using, you would want to do that audit. It's too fancy a word. You want to find out what curriculum they're using before you start doing the PD, before you get too far into the school year.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, these are things that are overlapping, right? We have ongoing professional development open to all teachers, and we have more targeted technical assistance designed to be responsive to the analysis that we're doing for LEAs overall. So it's really, it's both of those things. We make those trainings available to teachers and to LEAs who already identify that as a need, specifically for educators related or not to the curricula, right? In terms of how to teach literacy. And then we collect the information this summer and analyze it, and then begin to use that to target technical assistance in more sophisticated or specific ways.
So let me go back to the beginning of this question. I'm not asking the question again. That OSSI is going to be doing some work, training, and professional development around reading, and whether that essentially is what we required in the dyslexia bill. And you said you'll look at that and get back to us.
Yeah, I don't want to speak towards a specific bill that I don't have in front of me. Obviously, these are goals that we're committed to broadly across the city towards that outcome, but I just don't know the specifics. So I'd be happy to get back to the committee on that.
Okay. I went way over what I was hoping to do. I want to thank you all. I would thank Dr. Bazron, except she left. Chancellor Farabee, thank you. Superintendent Young, thank you. Deputy Mayor Kine, thank you. As I had said at the beginning of the record, this has been the third of 3 hearings that the committee has had on school reopening and academic recovery this week. The record is open until the close of business on June 11th. Let me just double check I got that right. Yes, close of business on June 11th. Again, thank you all. The time is 12:58 in the afternoon, and this hearing is adjourned.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.